People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? Pretty sure I was the weird kid. But runner-up was a very nice, but shy girl who immigrated from China and loved computers, but was incredibly meek. A conversation was like prying teeth, would only make strange noises in class, etc. And frankly, in hindsight, what little she said at the time makes me realize now she was in an emotionally abusive household. Example, she had some small role in a school play in middle school. I was happy for her when I saw that her mom came, as she said she doubted her mom would come. I asked afterwards, and she said her mom said she looked like a sack of dog bones on the stage during her part. I legit did not know what to say when she said stuff like that, because I was a kid myself. Fortunately I can say I know how she turned out, and it's a happy ending. We went to the same college, and she was originally signed up for pre-med, because even though this gal was a computer whiz, her mom insisted she had to be a doctor. Within a year though, she rebelled against everything and became a computer science major, the horror, and became an own source of advice for other kids of Asian descent, in particular seeking to stand up to their parents' expectations. She's now a test engineer working for a household name computing company and posts pictures of international travel and various geeky hobbies, so I guess she was great once she could find herself, and most of the weirdness was imposed upon her. Edit. People are asking how I was weird. Unfortunately, while astronomy is a cool thing to be into as an adult, it is not when you are at an all-girls high school. This was combined with how honestly I didn't know how to interact with a lot of the other kids. I wasn't shy, but had real trouble making friends. Was very ostracized in elementary school too, like kid who sat alone at lunch for years and didn't figure it out until college. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers, and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me and asked me to the 8th grade prom, but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school, I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me and that he would kill himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around, and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in HS. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that point. Now, by the looks of Facebook, he's a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. I was the weird kid. Mum was never really around, no father figure. We lived in a half-renovated house with animal feces through it because my mum kept her dogs indoors 24/7. We were also extremely broke, like mum would go hungry to feed my sister and I. My mother, on reflection, was mentally unwell due to the depression of losing her mum 2 years prior. She still hasn't recovered to this day. I realized years later my clothes probably smelt like animal feces all the time. I had very few friends in high school. I ended up getting into drugs at 13 to escape from my sheet life, plus I had no boundaries or restrictions from any parental figures. I also lived on my PlayStation and Gamma Boy due to not having any friends to actually spend time with, making me socially inept. Both my sister and I were eventually uplifted by welfare services and I ended up in a boys' home for 3 years, where I finally got the boundaries and basic care I needed. I had a great social worker who worked hard to set me up with a positive future despite my circumstances. I slowly gained social skills and realized I could have a normal life. After leaving school, I realized I had a strong work ethic that led me to work up to holding management positions in basically every business I've worked in since my early 20s. It also got me through university doing a Bachelor of Social Work. Now I'm a social worker supporting young adults to change the direction of their lives and to have a life they can be proud of. I've just been promoted to manage the service I work for and to grow the service so it can be extended to other districts. I guess I've done all right for myself when I look at where I've come from. Edit. I'm also happily married with 3 amazing kids whom I make my life mission to have a better upbringing than the one I experienced. Edit. Quite the response. Thanks for everyone who left positive comments. I'm glad I could share this with you. For those who are asking about mum and my sister became a semi-pro athlete and also graduated uni. She's in a long-term relationship and has a job that enables her to train for her sporting discipline. Mum is doing okay. She's still not mentally there, but she is better than she was, and she does try most days. She loves the grandkids and spoils them every time she sees them. She's got a job now and has held it down for a few months. Her decision making is still poor sometimes, but my sister and I keep an eye on her and challenge her decisions when they are not helpful to her quality of life. We had a kid that would do weird shit in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party. He saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with 2 of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off leaving his 2 mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was aspect or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke, it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying this tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free English town and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a second time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back, and he now works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX as well as running street art classes, where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. In 2004, I had a computers class with James Holmes, guy who shot up the theater in Colorado, my junior year of high school. He was a sophomore at the time. I never really talked to him much, but he hung out with a group of kids that were near where my group would hang out during lunch. He was a face that I would recognize walking through the halls. At the time, we had a number of mutual friends. One of my good friends is also named James and had been given the nickname Doggy by Holmes to avoid confusion. They were on the same soccer team. Every once in a while at lunch our groups would merge. There was one day where our groups had merged and everyone, except for one person from his group and myself, were still at our spot. I'm not 100% sure it was him, but it very well could have been. Whether this was him or not, while everyone else was gone, something happened where he started to talk about shooting up the school because people were so superficial and fake. I did not take him seriously, but I still recognized how dangerous and odd of a comment it was. As a result, I remember saying something like, "You might be right about people being superficial, but you're better than that. If you did that, then you wouldn't be any better than them. Wouldn't it be better to prove them wrong with your own success?" He then responded by saying something like, "Well, you guys are cool, so don't worry about that. But yeah, I guess you are right." After that, I never really saw him much or interfaced with that group much either. Oddly enough, he ended up also going to the same college I attended, Riverside. I had no idea that he had even attended Riverside until after the school shooting in Colorado. We reconnected in college over a decade ago through email at first, then started going to live concerts together. We are still sort of friends today, though I, and several friends of mine, have questioned this decision over the years. He is still weird af point in grade school. He was the kid who talked funny, smelled bad, read the dictionary for fun, was no good at sports or friends, but generally perceived to be smart point. He disappeared after 6th grade and the joke was that he invented time travel and was actually that guy from those commercials who wore the wacky question mark suit and talked about making money through federal grants or some shit. Turns out he didn't really go anywhere, just to a different middle/high school than most of us. He reached out to me in a weird way and claimed I was the only person from our childhood he was interested in talking to. I was also a bit of a loner for being the smarty pants girl who sucked at sports and had few friends. As an adult, he is constantly doing social activities, but also claims to hate most things and people, and is a habitual liar. As a result, I still don't really know what his story is, but my guess is he is on the spectrum, but has never been diagnosed because his parents were super neglectful. He works a corporate job, spends most of his money on concerts, does not drink, writes weird novels, I've read one, and is probably a bigger misogynist than he lets on to me, and he's pretty bad even then. We have clashed several times over his sexist views. They can get a little red pill why, and the awkward question of whether he likes me. I have been very clear that we are friends from the start. An incident last summer made me stop talking to him for 7 months, but we are sort of hanging out again, just more sparingly. Let me introduce to Josh. Josh was a strange boy in both looks and demeanor. Clearly he was from a poor background, which stood out in school, because the overall demographic of the school was upper middle class. So Josh shows up on the first day, slightly grubby looking, barely able to write his own name at 11 years old, and looking like he wanted to punch a wall. He quickly made a name for himself, acting up in class, being tardy and generally being a bit of a nuisance. He'd disrupt lessons, he'd lash out at other students, and he had a clear anger problem. Josh became an easy target for bullies because he would react to their bullying, usually by throwing a chair. It's fair to say Josh had little to no friends. We were a tutor group of about 27 to 30, depending on people coming and going. Not a particularly tight-knit, but we had bonded over a couple of things. A girl who'd had a brush with death was in our tutor. One of our tutors left part way through the year. By year 9 we, for the most part, began to tolerate Josh. Josh as a result became more trusting and calmed down. He still had hell of a temper, and he still was an easy target, but he began to try and socialize a bit more. One day it was a rainy lunchtime, and he came and sat with a group of us, all from the same tutor group. We asked him how he was, and he disclosed to us that his mum's new boyfriend had been showing him gay porn. We of course, being 13 to 14, didn't really know what to say or how to react, but there was a resounding consensus that that was not normal. He'd hinted at a very unhappy home life before. In hindsight I don't know why any of the teachers didn't pick up on it when things he had mentioned were such a safeguarding risk point. The more and more Josh disclosed more of how miserable his home life was, how abused he was, the more respect we had for him. He didn't know anything other than violence. He had never been shown love or respect. He had never been given the opportunity to better himself. Over time we became very protective of Josh. The cool boys in our tutor group would step into fights to defend him. We'd all keep an eye out for him when he was walking home, etc. I saw Josh about a year ago. I caught a glimpse of him in the street and shouted his name. He came running over and gave me the biggest bear hug ever. He told me he'd been working really hard on himself and that he was hoping to get a job in the local comic book shop where he spends hours and hours reading. He seemed genuinely happy and like he'd escaped his abusive background. Honestly, I wish him the absolute best, and I hope he finds both happiness and stability. Names have been changed. Well, since I was the weird kid in school, I thought I'd share some thoughts of my own. For context, in school I was horrendously overweight. I maximumed out at 100 kilograms / 210 pounds at age 15, before deciding to change things. More on that in a secretary. Not attractive, socially extremely awkward, social anxiety off the scale, and hence found it difficult to make friends. But I did have a few. At the time I felt they may have been pity friends, but I do still keep in contact with many of them. My best friends in high school were my dog and my cat, as they were the only two beings on planet Earth that I could relate to without feeling nervous. I was always picked last for everything, any kind of sport or group work, which worked wonders for my self-esteem. To be fair though, I did suck at sport. My grades were good but not great. They could have been much better, but I didn't care about school. All I wanted to do was play video games, so I did the bare minimum I needed to pass, and that was that. Actually, that is my single greatest regret. If I could go back in time and change one thing, it would be that I would take school more seriously and work hard for a good grade. The way that I made it through is that I had/have the best, most wonderfully supportive parents in the universe. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now as an adult, I'm 32 in a few months, I see how patient and kind they were with me for years with very little appreciation. They always helped and encouraged me, put me into a good private school, so the bullying, although still there, was much less than it would have been in a public school. Things changed around 11th grade, when I got tired of being fat, for starters, and started to take responsibility for my appearance. I basically hated being overweight so much that I starved myself down to 75 kilograms/160 pounds by will alone over the course of about 18 months. I didn't suddenly become Mr. Popular, mind you, but it did help with my self-esteem point. When I left school and went to university, I started going to work on my social anxiety. At first I just tried forcing myself to make eye contact with people, initiate conversations, etc. I actually made a list of all the things I hated doing and started doing them one by one, which sorta worked over time, but also sucked. Imagine going into the woods and barefist boxing a grizzly to get over your fear of bears. I have many emotional scars from that time, and it is not a recommended approach, even though I did improve somewhat. What really helped in the long run was getting to the bottom of why I had such anxiety, rather than just going after the symptoms. I'm a devout reader, so I borrowed/bought every book I could find about shyness, anxiety, even a few of the how to make friends and influence people kind of self-help books that I had formerly looked on with disdain, but I figured, hey, what do I have to lose? I found even the bad books had one or two good things in them, so I basically made a list of all the things that they said in those books that I identified with and worked on changing those. The main one was I realized that I was subconsciously getting my self-worth from the approval of others, which meant I could never relax around them as I was always worrying what they might be thinking about me, rather than just enjoying the conversation over time, and it did take years. I slowly reprogrammed my mind into healthier ways of thinking, and slowly but surely I really did improve. I also realized I really wanted a girlfriend. I was about 25 at this point, so instead of just waiting for a girl to fall into my lap, literally and figuratively, I took action, threw out all my sweat pants and t-shirts, and started wearing jeans and button-up shirts, with collars and everything, got rid of my sparks, read every book on marriage I could find, and worked hard to be the kind of guy that a woman would actually find attractive. Later that year I successfully got my first girlfriend, who is now my wife, and we are 3.5 years into a very happy marriage. I'm 3/4 of the way through my second master's degree, and life is going pretty well. I still am shyer than I would like, and still make embarrassing social faux pas from time to time, but even though I lived through the last 15 or so years of my life, even I have no idea how I got from there to here. TLDR, I was the weird kid at school, now I'm doing pretty great. Super late to this thread, but I thought I'd add my story anyways. Way back in elementary school I sat next to this kid, Austin. He wasn't too strange most of the time, but he certainly had his quirks. Any second of free time he had was spent drawing control panels of airplanes on pieces of paper and then miming the motions of a pilot, accompanied by airplane noises with his mouth, and of course communicating with air traffic control. Games of kickball during recess came to a halt when Austin saw a plane flying across the sky. He'd point up to it and inform everyone of the model number and any other info about the plane in question. He was a small airplane savant, but it quickly got old with the rest of the class. He would be teased about his love of airplanes. Kids would laugh as he sat at his desk in the corner and made the whoosh Sounds of his imaginary plane taking off of the runways. They'd ball up his drawings and toss them in the trash. When he wasn't looking, they'd tease about how proud he was of his new airplane t-shirt. You know how mean kids can be, but Austin never relented. He did the same things he always did until he moved away. It might have been 5th grade when he moved away, and we never saw him again. I wasn't great friends with him, but he was enough of a character to leave an impression, and I never forgot about him. Fast forward 20 years or so, I get that bug to search for old names on Facebook, and his name pops into my head. After some quick searching, I find a profile picture that is most definitely him. He's wearing aviator sunglasses with a headset and microphone and the biggest smile you've ever seen. I click on the picture and sure enough, it's him. And sure enough, he's actually a pilot. I got the biggest goofiest grin across my face when I realized that this weird kid that everyone teased became the guy that grew up and lived out his dream. He flies planes for a living and does what he pretended to do at his desk every day. I don't think I've ever been more happy for someone else than I was for him. We'll call him Luke. I actually really liked him. He was pretty funny and into cool shit like video games and fantasy. Like even to this day I can't diagnose what mental disability he had. It's like nothing I've seen since. But his mental disability plus his family issues meant his was truly on the highest difficulty point. His mother was a paranoid schizophrenic with dementia. Every time I was over his house to play, she would sit there in vegetative state in order to not acknowledge I was there. Luke's brother had learning difficulties as well and was oftentimes hyperactive. He was actually fairly grounded as he was the better looking one, so naturally he had a lot of friends. The worst one was Luke's dad. He wasn't abusive or anything as far as I know. He was stern, but you could tell he loved his family. But he had an addictive personality, to the maximum. Any substance that is addictive, he would get addicted to it. I remember when I first met him, his thing was chewing tobacco. He'd chew that sheet literally all day. His teeth were black. And by the time I lost contact with Luke, he was addicted to cough syrup. Luke's house, which was a hoarder mess by the way, had piles and piles of glass syrup bottles stacked up because he'd just downed them. You often saw him begging on the streets and always looked rough as fuck, even compared to the legit homeless guys, because remember, Luke's dad wasn't even homeless. Anyway, after this is conjecture and rumors as I lost contact with him after secondary school. His mother died, and his father lost custody, and Luke and his brother moved in with a relative who was very outgoing and encouraging. His dad is now in and out of mental institutions, and not doing very well at all. Anyway, despite all this, I saw Luke as I drove by him a few times. He always wore a wacky suit, and I always clocked his trademark twitch and him muttering to himself, which I always liked. He was always walking towards college. Anyway, turns out despite his circumstances, he went to college and got fuckloads of qualifications. Went to university in Scotland, which is a good idea because it was free or at least cheaper than universities in England. And now has a job as a researcher for BBC4, which I hear is a pretty sweet gig. Last time I saw him, I teared up because of how much he's turned himself around. He no longer had his stutter nervous tone. He spoke in a very well-spoken accent and showed he had very real intelligence behind him. I can honestly say, I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. So to TLDR and answer your question, Opus, he turned out alright. Guy 1, tall, meek, no confidence. Now, just graduated from police cadet and will be equivalent to 02 with his father, 09, behind his back. Guy 2, thin as a stick, weird penchant for gay stuff and weird alternative visual art. Now, proudly gay. Professional animator involved in world-class projects. Guy 3, remembers it all, kind of autistic child. Now, lawyer. Remembers text in exact detail. Bully 4, tried to slash my face in school and got away scot-free due to learning dysfunction, LD, or something. Now, where the fuck is he? Bully 5, macho kind of bully. Now, dropped out of college twice. Now tending a net cafe. Girl 6, we think she is a psycho. Now, abusive relationship, she is the abusive one. Dropped out of school once. Talked about being a patisserie, didn't come through. Tried to cosplay, has minimal cult following. Generally unsuccessful. Rapist 7. Known to have rapped a classmate. Macho as fuck. Extremely intimidating, like always on steroids. Sometimes later, physical confrontation. I had to cling to a hidden switchblade because this faker could go off any second. Now, tried to run an anime business. Has a complex about maintaining public rep. Never heard from him again. Me 8. A lot of weirdness and a dose of ADHD. The kid who guessed his way into a primary school screening and exclaimed computer engineer when asked what do you want to be when you grow up. Now, assistant professor in a national university, researching new computer networks technologies. I was the weird kid. I grew up in a household where the kids were ornaments and shouldn't require any maintenance. My brother was fine with that. He was tall, muscular, good looking, funny, so he made friends easily and fit in every way he went. I, on the other hand, was nerdy, wore glasses, had bad acne, crooked teeth, and had no idea how to interact with people because my parents hardly ever interacted with me. I made so many mistakes with people because I had no role models. My parents would have adult friends over for an evening. It was like a gathering in the 1800s with polite conversation over a glass of wine and hors d'oeuvres, and that was the extent of my social exposure. On top of that, I had the normal desire of every kid to earn their parents' approval and attention, but nothing I did was ever good enough. No grades were high enough, no skill at gymnastics or ballet, or diving or ice skating or skiing, or martial arts was good enough. So of course I started to act out to get attention. I stole things and got caught. I got in trouble at school. I got bullied really badly. That one wasn't my fault. They mocked and beat me because I wore glasses and had braces and has a gorgeous brother who did nothing to help me and in fact gleefully made things worse. I got my academic sheet together and got 3 university degrees, which actually got a nod from my dad, but that's it. So I started to believe I was unlovable. Obviously something was wrong with me, and I was unworthy of love or attention. I must be a deeply flawed human being that no one can love. I carried that feeling with me for a long time. I pushed away 2 husbands to reinforce my self-loathing. See, I'm unlovable. But then I met someone who saw past all that and refused to be pushed away. I threw everything I had at him, and he stuck with me, finally making me realize I have some worth. I still have my moments, but when I do he tells me how much he loves me and what a great person I am. I'm so lucky to have him. We have 2 fabulous kids and I tell them all the time how wonderful and great they are and how much I love them and how much I love spending time with them. So overall, turned out pretty well. But looking back at how messed up I was, it was no wonder no one wanted to hang out with me, and I was the social outcast. Edit. That was actually surprisingly therapeutic to write. Even if no one reads it, it was uplifting to get it out. Thanks, Reddit. In high school he was always the awkward kid who had very few friends. I spoke to him occasionally but never struck up a friendship. He would spend a lot of time with teachers, have a very feminine demeanor, and that led to bullying. Being the focus of bullies myself, I understood his pain a little. But being a jerk-off teenager, I wasn't any good to anyone. Fast forward a few years, and I'm doing the regular World of Warcraft player in university deal. I raid regularly and run a tight crew. I befriended my fellow raid leaders and 2 of them are dating. Let's give them the names of Jess and Tom. They're both great. On TeamSpeak, pre-Discord sadly, regularly, and enjoy the banter. We are a group of 30 players, but I clicked better with a smaller group. Jess and Tom regale to me of how they met. Tom was a shy boy from Australia who met a girl. He plucked up the courage to ask her out one fateful day at the pub. I tell them I also live somewhere close and we should meet up. I've known them for a year, but never seen their faces. It's not uncommon, and I decided to see how it goes. Well, I turn up, and to my surprise it's the kid from my grade in school. Both he and I are shocked that we had no idea for so long. The anonymity of online games and the nature of changes in age took us both by surprise. All was good, and I gained a new friend, too, since Jess was awesome. But, for anyone familiar with online gaming, especially World of Warcraft, drama is never far away. Jess decided she wanted to change partners. We all fall out of love. I tell her to just be honest and deal with it. She doesn't and decides to try and cheat on Tom. I'll let him know and force the issue. He's actually relieved because he wants to move on. He has been ignoring her and hoping she would get the hint that he wants to do something else. He tells me for the past few years he's wanted to transition, to go from living as a man to living as a woman. I'm glad he's found what he wants, but am a little surprised that he chose to cause so much difficulty. Both of them did. Instead of being honest. Well, Tom is now Samantha and decides to move away. She cuts off contact from anyone with the final reason to me as I only knew you as a guy. You wouldn't get me as I'm now. Huh. Best of luck. It was a strange adventure in my life that feels a little like a sitcom whenever I reflect on it. I wish her, both Samantha and Jess, the best in their futures. TLDR. Weird boy becomes a friend, has a girlfriend, drama ensues, boy becomes a girl. Kid in elementary school. He was small for his age, always talking about WWI and second stuff like different vehicle characteristics and battle maneuvers. Dude knew his sheet, but was condescending as hell because you didn't know the particulars of the Battle of the Argonne Forest, the type of personal fashion sense that you expected him to show up in a tweed jacket with elbow patches and a briefcase and perpetually smelled of mothballs. All this isn't unusual per se, but you add his general twitchy personality and hair trigger temper tantrums, one of which was defending his best friend who got expelled over a hit list that was found in his desk with classmates' names on it. Kid was just odd. Cut to high school, and I hadn't seen, heard or thought about him in years. I had to go to summer school one year, and who do I meet except no more tweed. Guy was rocking Jinkos, ripped black heavy metal band tees, metal stud bracelets and spike collars, and his normally red hair was dyed black, shaved on sides and back, and the top was spiked up into a 4-pointed crown about 10 to 12 inches tall, just standing there smoking a cigarette and I'm thinking, oh faking hell, he sees me, duck and cover, he's coming over to me, call the police, call the National Guard, call my grandma, and tell her I love her. Dude was chill as fuck. Talk to him before class starts, still into the WWI and second stuff, but not a dick about it anymore. Said he was there to boost some grades because he was looking to go to university to become a historian with a focus on the World Wars. Great sense of humor, kinda dark but funny, and the patience of a saint. A few people tried to start some shit over his clothes and stuff, said things to him that I would have thrown down over just for hearing, but he just brushed it off. Talking to him, asking what changed for the better. He just says, we'd brother, we take life too seriously. It ends all the same, man, they are just talking about some bullshit anyway. Truth. One kid looked like a bird, was shy, had occasional stuttering issues, and was lanky, so he had an awkward walk. He got the nickname Bird in elementary school. As he got ready to go to middle school, he was excited to finally get a second chance and hopefully shed that nickname. Before he had even walked on the bus the first day of school, these 8th graders pointed out how he looked like a bird. So he endured middle school and hoped that high school would give him a third chance at shedding the name and being liked. He quickly hit over 6 feet due to puberty, so now he was dubbed Big Bird. Went through high school single, with a small group of friends. On the last day of school, he tells us how he purposefully chose a college on the opposite side of the country so he could finally shed his nickname and have a chance to be normal/popular. Fast forward to move-in day at college for him. His posted on Facebook revealing that people are already referring to him as Bird in his dorm. It was a super sad post that was hard to read because it was very clear that all hope and happiness inside him was gone. Fast forward to today. Dude has a wife and a child on the way. They both appear to have good jobs, and he looks a million times happier than he ever was. So it at least worked out for him. I'm currently my school's weird kid, but I want to say that school is the only place where I act like that. I'm definitely abnormal, but the thing is, being abnormal is the quickest way to see the worst in allegedly kind people, or at least that's my experience. I've heard all of these kids being all polite and nice and seemingly developing into model citizens when interacting with each other, but once I hear them talking about me, I learn just how cruel and judgmental these people can be. I don't even really do anything. I started high school having made the decision to not make friends and stay on my own at least until I got the education bullshit out of the way, because some people are like that, and it isn't as bizarre as you might think to not want to constantly surround oneself with people, and in order to send this message I'm constantly looking at the ground and never talk to anybody. I thought that would just make me invisible, but apparently it's faking hilarious. No joke, when the people around me have run out of things to talk about, I'll hear them giggling and whispering about how earlier I was just standing there. Most of the kids at my school have taken to reporting about me to their friends. It's also now become a joke to loudly talk about how creepy I apparently am, saying how terrified they are of me when surely they know I can hear it. They're just making a show out of me to make their friends laugh. They'll turn a corner, see me there minding my own business, then run out screaming and praying but also laughing. The point is, when I leave town to do whatever and nobody who I have to see every day is around, I behave much more normally and don't have to hide. I probably wouldn't even be hiding anymore if the other students weren't so goddamn awful. Once I'm done with school I won't be required to deal these horrible people every day, and I won't have to worry about what anyone thinks. Be nice to your weird kids, people, even if that just means leaving them alone. The weird kid at my school was never weird. Everyone just decided that this was the guy who we make the butt of every joke. He's the one that we all make fun of as viciously as possible. I was friends with this guy before we got to high school, and he was a normal dude that had a pretty sarcastic sense of humor and liked video games and anime. Standard sheet. One day someone asked him if he was watching porn on the computer in the library. He very obviously wasn't. It was one of the animes he liked to watch. Trying to flip the joke on the kid, he says, "Of course, I'm definitely watching porn right now." Well, they all just decided to take his answer literally because they're all dicks. Rumors spread that he was watching bestiality in the library, and it balloons to a demented level that couldn't be scaled back. Everyone to this day still probably thinks he actually did that. Luckily this kid was factless. He knew high school was bullshit and he would be out of there soon. I talked with him about it and he told me, "People are just going to think what they want to think. I don't waste my time on them. This guy's obviously doing fine today." It's probably been about 10 years since high school. There are no weird kids in school. It was you and your peers' childish bullshit that makes them weird. They were never a quarter as weird as you remember them. That's how you and your shitty friends decided to think of them and talk about them. Unless the person has mental disabilities, they are just going to be a normal person. I don't have a particularly egregious story of what he was like, just standard awkwardness. I was a somewhat awkward kid too, but there are tiers to this sort of thing, and I climbed up the ladder, in part by teasing some of the other kids in my tier. Nothing serious, calling someone named Patrick Patricia, etc. But I'm not proud of it. But there's one particular thing that stood out with this kid. We'd been paired up for some school project, so he came over to my house to work on it. And then, in the middle of the project, he suddenly blurts out, "Do you think your mom would let me come live here with you?" I was completely caught off guard. I just instinctively responded with something like, "No, I don't think she would." Because that was my honest answer. I mean, we didn't have a spare bedroom or anything. She'd never met this kid before. We weren't even friends. I mean, I made fun of him at school. It just struck me as the craziest thing I'd ever heard of in my entire life. But we were in 7th or 8th grade, I think. Way past the point of "I wish I could live here. Your mom buys the good cereal," or something like that. I understand now, as an adult, that he was desperately trying to find a way out of his family situation. I can only imagine what was happening there. All these years later, I've never come up with an explanation that I wasn't horrified by. But I never told anyone he had asked. And I'm horrified by that too. But to answer the question, at some point in high school, he joined the junior ROTC. I've never seen him on Facebook, but he did pop up on MySpace once, and I saw he'd become an officer in the army. I was in the military too at that point, so I sent him a message, but he never responded. I'm glad he found a way out. I was the weird kid. Like really weird. Seriously. I was transferred schools after grade 11 because the police got involved and the school could not stop the bullied cause I was weird and different. I went to a small school at the time and maybe had like 100-ish kids a grade. It was so damn bad from grade 7 to 11 I had even been pulled from school some days. Columbine happened while I was in grade 9. I remember because I became everyone's new joke about it. I dyed my hair black and made my mom buy me all new black clothes. You wanted your school's very own first goth, and you got it. People tortured me so relentlessly that the teachers began to fear I'd be that next shoot 'em up student and police were brought in, and I was moved schools the following year. I was called weird. Since I was a kid it was always the insult used, so I mean I thought I was normal, but here I was told being no repeatedly. When they transferred me, they faking did me a world of good. I made friends. I was never bullied again at my new school. I got involved in extracurriculars. I won awards. I went on to go to college and I'm now in a career in healthcare as well as a school bus driver because I want to be able to help kids in whatever damn way I can cause I see the signs. You're not weird, bud. You'll meet some friends who are like you somewhere else. Your people are out there. I also ran into a teacher from school who still remembered me and was pretty surprised to find out where I ended up in life. Just an average Joe making an average wage. No serial killer or celebrity or genius story here. In middle school I was not so much the weird kid as I was the one who got bullied, was really into computers etc. In high school I really grew into myself. Suddenly was popular with women when I had not been before, which was very polarizing and confusing to go from grade 9 nobody wanted to touch me to grade 10 to 12, suddenly everyone wanted to be my friend. The interesting thing for me is the social awkwardness or the feeling of waiting for one of these people to suddenly go surprise, and that they were actually bullying/pranking me the whole time was always in the back of my mind. It never came though. I had become legitimately liked by the majority of people. What this did instill in me during high school though, was that the weird kids in high school, or the people who got bullied, were people I would stand up for, publicly. I joined the weightlifting club, and became one of the best track athletes at our high school. Not the best, but I was solidly in the top 3. I remember 2 guys hitting the Unheard kid with rulers while he walked down the hallway one time, and I took one of them. He man lifted up and put him into a trash bin in the hallway, and I got suspended for a week. They never bullied that guy ever again. Now, on the flip side, I also befriended the weird girl in our computer programming class. My computer-centric hobbies never changed, despite everything. She seemed really socially awkward, so I would do things like invite her to parties or stuff like that, just being nice, trying to help someone get out of their shell. Fast forward to graduation, and I found out she was stalking me for the last year, and had a photo album full of pictures of me that had clearly been taken, while I did not know I was being photographed. As far as I know, she lives with her parents, and is still super weird. We are in our 30s now. I think the worst part about this is, a lot of people knew she was doing this, and said nothing to me about it, and just let me find out later. Apparently her 2 close female friends also did similar things. All of them targeted me. I don't think they were really attracted to me so much as I was the only male in the popular crowd who didn't cheat on them. High school sucks. I ran into a few during high school. I was even a weird one myself. But this one guy, man, I heard back in middle school he slashed his arms in an attempt to impress some girls. I can only imagine how well that went. But later on, in high school, when I barely spoke to anyone, one day he came up to me and started talking to me about learning martial arts and becoming like some kind of legionary. I didn't really buy it. Some other weird kid did though, but I listened to what he had to tell me. He went on about how he was moving all over South America and how he learned from different masters, how he's a half vampire. Whispered to me to tell some kids to fuck off before they get hurt, and showed me a pocket knife or a Swiss Army knife. Can't remember. One time I saw him about to get in a fight in a school bathroom, and he was doing that bouncy stance that most fighting video game characters would do, and from the sounds I heard as I walked out of there, he definitely got his ass kicked. He was the instigator, so I didn't really Feel bad. A few years after I graduated, I saw him on a news report about how he's spending time in prison for impersonating a federal officer in a kidnapping. Turns out the girl was underage, which was why she was convinced easily to go with him, and they were found at some hotel. The girl's alright though. As far as I know, we had a lot of half vampire LARPer types at my school. One even went as far as to claim that he stopped 2 hurricanes from hitting the school. My savior. I mean, I was socially awkward and hung around band kids, but I turned out fine. I have a feeling that most of these is a coping mechanism for dealing with not having many friends, going through some abuse at home, or not having a fulfilling lifestyle during those years, but everyone has their day at different times. Not as weird as a lot of these it seems, but there was a weird kid, weak, in high school who was extremely socially awkward because he skipped 2 grades to be there. There were a handful of us who went to the same college, and one of them I would have lunch with every so often. One day in our 3rd year we were having lunch, and Weak sees us and pulls up a chair to our table for 2, which was pretty full with our stuff. He barges into our conversation, tells us about how he's doing really poorly in school, couldn't get into the major he wanted, mechanical engineering maybe, because he got some bad grades in math, so he was in civil engineering instead. Neither of us is super interested in what he's saying, but we are polite about it. Then all of a sudden he says, oh, my birthday is next week, I'll be 18, then I can finally have sex with a girl. My friend, who's female, and I give each other this look wide-eyed, like I can't believe he just said that. How the hell do we respond to that? After a few awkward seconds of silence I say, is that so? And unfortunately I didn't pay that close attention to what he said next, but it was probably nonsense. A couple minutes later he gets up to fill his drink, and we let out what we've been holding in. He realizes he has to find someone willing to have sex with him, right? I really hope so. Oh god, is he gonna try to rap someone because he thinks he's like entitled to it or something? I haven't seen him since. Haven't talked to that friend since graduation, but somebody told me he dropped out or something. Not sure what happened to him long term. I was the weird kid in high school. I played video games, watched anime, did competitive fighting game tournaments, and knew every line to Star Wars. I was obsessed with professional wrestling and watched it religiously. I also had a fashion sense of Helen Keller and looked like Chris Farley. I also was extremely into rap and hip hop. This was the time when Tupac and Biggie were at their peak. I became such a hip hop head in high school. But again, small school, religious school, nobody was into that rap crap. My issue was definitely being in a small school and not being able to fit in with anyone, so I would act out strangely for attention. After I graduated though, I was able to meet more varied people. I got to be myself and not feel uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't have to act out for attention or feel the need to act like a weirdo to stand out. During this time, my loves were all still the same: gaming, computers, wrestling, and hip hop. I also got onto video editing by starting with anime music videos and then moving up to real projects. The point of all this is that I joined a hip hop studio in college as their it and video editing guy, became best friends with a bunch of local and semi-famous people, and I really became my own person during this time and credit this period for who I'm today. I went to a reunion that I got surprisingly invited to. Needless to say, my former classmates were shocked to see what I've been doing in the past 5 years or so. It was a pretty fun and crazy experience overall. The moral of the story: if anyone here is still in high school, be your faking self and don't try to do weird shit for attention or to get people to like you. It never works. You'll only get fake friends, and it'll just make you more depressed in the end. Oh lordy, is this an embarrassing story? One of the weird kids at my high school held a candle for me for all 3 years that we went to school together. He asked me out, and we went on one date, and then I was one of those awful girls that friend-zoned him hard the rest of high school, but still hung out with him on the regular. He truly was a weirdo kid though. Always wore a black trench coat to school, obsessed with Star Wars. Would tell me and my best friend all sorts of faking crazy stories about shit. He claimed he was one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and he promised to shepherd us to safety during the revelations or whatever because he had a soft spot for us. often claimed he was reincarnated and that he hung out on the regular on the astral plane. You can maybe kinda see why we still liked hanging around with him. He was hilarious. Well, the summer after my first year of college we ended up becoming fac buddies. I came home from school freshly broken up with my first serious boyfriend and totally heartbroken, and it turned out the weird kid still had the hots for me, so I gave it a go to see how it would be. Gotta say, the setch was crazy good, even though we usually were listening to the Star Wars soundtrack while we did it, and his dad's ashes were in a plastic bag on the bedside table most of the time. As young and stupid teenagers do, we got pregnant. Turns out the pull-out method is not ideal. We agonized for quite a bit about what we were gonna do. Reality set in hard on me that I was going to have a baby with a bipolar chronic smoker who worked as a manager at an ice cream parlor, and that it wasn't really the future I wanted. Ended up having an abortion and he cheated on me with some girl named Trinity, not her real name, while I was in recovery, since I couldn't have sex for 3 to 4 months afterwards. My friends were pissed when they found out and went to Egby's house and told him off at his work and made him cry in front of his coworkers. It's been 10 years since then and we still on occasion run into each other on the internet. Sometimes he texts me and tells me he had a dream about me and our baby. He's had a bit of a life since last we saw each other in person. He's been married and divorced twice now, and I believe one of his ladies had a miscarriage, which is sad. He's with some equally nerdy lady who looks vaguely like me, so I can only assume he's still somewhat holding on to that flame. 2 years ago he tearfully texted me and confessed that he was on meth the entire time we dated that summer after college, and explained that was the reason he was so crazy and cheated on me. All I can say is bullet dodged. For reasons you will notice, I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. This was the situation and how events played out. So from 8th grade to senior year at a private school there was a very introverted, awkward, and occasionally downright weird girl in our class. She was super into martial arts, traditional Japanese culture, and anime/manga. Her parents were unrealistically controlling, and it was to a point you could tell something was off about the family dynamics. I had a birthday the whole grade attended a party for, and her father refused to let her go on a chaperoned scavenger hunt. Even with him chaperoning. Day 1 of 8th graders we are in English class introducing ourselves. The teacher hears she's into martial arts and asks if this young lady can show the class something. This poor, unfortunate young girl does a front kick, great form, and her shoe flies off and almost breaks a ceiling tile. This causes everyone to dive for cover. This was private Christian school, and this young lady was just as into boys as girls, which ostracized her even more. I want to mention I was popular. Everyone liked me. I played every sport and was in several clubs. I was a little snarky, but I made a point to never pick on or tease anyone who didn't specifically pick a fight with me. Fast forward to 25 years old, and I've since moved out of state. I'm back in town visiting parents and run into this young lady. In a pro-level ugly duckling move, this girl lost her massive braces, developed amazing personality, and was studying to be an accountant. She was funny, beautiful, confident, and still into all of her high school passions, but on a much more healthy scale. We started dating that year and just celebrated our 2-year wedding anniversary in May. I learned she'd been crushing on me since day 1 of us meeting. Apparently I was the only person who was ever nice to her, or even tried to be polite by trying to talk to her, hence the crush. TLDR, that kid was a girl who had the ugly duckling change, had to get away from the ugly at home, and we are now married. I've got a few really short lame ones. One creepy kid that was into edgy satanic stuff, would draw pentagrams and cheat all the time. Also would poke me with sharp objects that included a hand-carved wooden turtle. Then he pulled out his insulin needle. I avoided him after this. He's an art major now, I think, and looks like a normal dude. Strange freshman. When I was a senior, very hyper but also very shy. Really into those Warriors books. Had panic attacks and would cry in class. She was in one of my squads when I was in JROTC and was one of my cadets. Good kid, just off. Now that I think about it, JROTC was probably good for her. Last I heard she joined the National Guard, so good for her I guess. Abused girl I knew in middle school, bad family life, and probably borderline autistic. We met up after I graduated and dated about 6 months. She had a kid, not mine. Good girl. Still abused. Still messed up. Very depressed. Her best friend slash girlfriend killed herself during high school. Sad. But she's a good mom, so there's that. Friend of mine that, looking back, was a weird dude. Super into playing guitar but also anim. Very loud. Very Christian. A little homophobic. Didn't date girls in high school, but would let them get all up on him. He joined the Air Force, and is still super into anim, but has a steady flow of disposable income that he spends on it. He collects anim patches now. Like a lot. Plays a lot of light novels slash dating sims. And then, I suppose, there's me. I didn't have the best family life, loving but overworked mom. Hand me down, and second hand clothes. Oldest of 4. Had a weird development. Would have to be the mature one, and then a new man would be in my mom's life and I'd get to be a kid again. My father wasn't great at the time. Best father figure I had, still have to, was my grandfather. In middle school I didn't have many friends. I was super into Halo and Star Wars. ABD would spend all my time role playing and playing video games. I cried in class over stupid things on occasion. Would get super into whatever romantic interest I had, and would always neglect my schoolwork. Spent a night on suicide watch. Maybe went a little crazy. Maybe it was an overreaction by medical providers. It's honestly hard to remember. My junior year of high school I discovered JROTC, and, finally, had something that got me to be at least a little normal. I put a lot of myself into JROTC, probably too much, but I made friends. And quite a few of them. I learned how to be a normal person and my work ethic. My mother died when I was 18. Fuck you, leukemia, and when I graduated high school my second stepdad kicked me out of the house. I came this close to being homeless and then I turned myself around. I moved in with my grandparents, got a job, worked for 6 months, decided I wanted to try to help people, so I wanted to be a cop. Got a job with feds doing airport security, moved out, did that for a few years. Got a girlfriend. Now I'm half of a cop and about to be a real cop in a few months. TLDR, military brats are a weird bunch. I knew a girl from first grade through end of high school that was always a social outcast. In 5th grade, our teacher did this thing where she got sent out to the other 5th grade class under some rouse of that teacher needing help on something, and basically had an intervention in our class to be kinder to her. I suppose it was a nice concept, but I'm sure she realized something was up when everyone talked to her and acted inclusive for a week, but essentially forgot about it. By the end of high school she had a few close friends, and I was happy to see that, but overall she was never a popular kid. Years later, after I had moved out of town and completed college, I found out she was being sentenced to serve time for killing her newborn. She had kept it secret, delivered at home, and when she went to the hospital for hemorrhaging, they got suspicious and notified police. Long story short, a dead baby was found in a plastic bag under her bed. I was shocked, of course, but was disgusted and saddened to learn more about her upbringing. Apparently, what came out later was there might have been issues with abuse with her father. Her childhood neighbor had recalled them playing with dolls as a child and remembered feeling odd when she mentioned that her dad touched her in an inappropriate area and showed it on the doll. Her dad was always a parent chaperone on trips and around when I was a child, and I shuddered to think about it. I don't know if she had suffered from abuse, mental illness, or simply made a terrible decision, but she is serving time in prison for a long while and was very pointedly not mentioned at our high school reunion. I hope she finds some resolve with whatever she is always going through. I was weird, but apparently not that weird in the school. My friend currently was the weird kid in high school. Did the Naruto run, anime crazy, weeaboo, video games, you name it. Kids will constantly ask him, hey, when are you going to shoot up the school? I want to know when not to come in. Everyone made fun of him, laughed at him, girls threw rocks at him when he was going home from school. Some kids followed him home and then shot paintballs at his house. His father thought they were his friends, but they weren't. So when things got bad, his father beat him, saying he has to be responsible for his friend's actions. He was very skittish, but I never remember anyone actually hating him, just a kind of indifference. The only girl I knew that hated him for his weirdness used to do everything in her power to make his life miserable, like if he started talking to girls or someone he was interested in, she would harass, spread rumors, etc. point about the girl until they stopped talking to him. She used to follow him home and throw stuff at him, prank call his house and order pizza to his house and stuff. When he complained, everyone said, "Oh, she just has a crush on you." This was when they were around 16-17 years old. She's still doing on FB from time to time. The responsibility thing was weird too, because it appeared around him that everyone could do anything except him. For example, someone spread a rumor about him shooting up the school because he was talking to someone about GTA 3, or was it Vice City, and the school called the police, his parents, the counselors, etc. They knew he was getting bullied, they knew who spread the rumors, and they knew what was happening. Principal's in jail for arson now, by the way. His father was weird on responsibility. When his younger brother got into a fight, he didn't hear about it until a day later, but his father pulled them both out of school, beat him in the school parking lot, and told him, "You protect your brother." He wasn't even in the same faking building when it happened. It was only recently too I found out that his parents desperately wanted him to be normal. His father signed him up for football, soccer, baseball, etc. All because those were things kids are supposed to do growing up. He was bullied constantly for being a sheet athlete and cheat at everything else because he had no interest in that. He likes swimming and running now though. He wants to get healthier. He also told me he would do some passive aggressive shit to get back at the bullies growing up, like framing one of them by constantly sticking gum on their desk during recess so they would get blamed by the teacher for chewing gum in middle school. He threw a football game by pretending to trip and causing his entire team to lose the game. The biggest thing he did that was seen as weird, voluntarily not walking during high school graduation. This was seen as an act of aggression by the school, and they threatened him by saying he won't be getting a diploma, he will not be allowed on school grounds, etc. He called the school's superintendent and he basically said, "Give him the diploma and don't waste my time." He was still banned from being anywhere near the school for 24 hours until graduation was concluded. The police said they would be looking out for him and making sure he stayed away. His parents were going to bring him out to eat, but couldn't find him. Graduation was stalled for 4 hours when they were searching the area for him. They thought he was planning something. They thought he was going to shoot the place up. They thought the worst from the weird kid. Where was he? He went to New York City to go to a comic book convention that he was more accepted, held interest in, and treated kindly. He told his parents, but they didn't want to hear anything about it. He told his teachers, his classmates, etc. But no one cared. I just remember the look on his face when he told me this story over Skype one night. No one believes me or cares what I have to say until it's too late, and that's what made him weird. No one really cared until they thought he was going against them. Today it is more of the same, but he takes it in stride. College had its ups and major downs. So, where is he now? He is currently living with his parents, battling depression and his lack of self-confidence. He has attempted suicide in the past, and he is planning to again. We are nearing 30 now. After the whole incel thing happened, people started commenting on his high school's graduation's Facebook page, all saying how they were surprised it wasn't him, and he's probably an incel too. I don't know who it was, but some girl responded saying he's not. He's really not an incel. According to him, she was an ex he dated in college until she had to move away for a better job opportunity. We are trying to make things better, but it's difficult battling against literal decades of constantly being told you are never good enough. Sorry, I wrote an entire novel about this. TLDR: bullying, emotional abuse, depression. Weird kid wants to get better, but also wants to die. I was the weird kid. I was kinda popular in primary school and kids thought I was funny, and then I got to high school and I guess I didn't know exactly how to relate to other kids since I kept making jokes, but now nobody was laughing anymore. So I began joking around in weirder ways, trying to just fit in and feel loved. And with that came the bullying and whatnot. The self-hatred, the many nights where I cried myself to sleep because in my mind everyone absolutely despised me and I had no idea why. The trust issues I still have because of shitty friends I made that ended up being mean dishonest people. As an adult, I've finally been diagnosed with ADHD, as well as major depressive disorder. I'm now medicated for the ADHD, which is great, because I can actually think clearly and control myself. But I've also been on pretty much every class of antidepressant over the last few years and none have actually worked, which is always great, because I love experiencing severe mood swings, memory loss, etc. For months at a time to, once again, discover that the latest pill I'm taking doesn't work. And neither do all the therapy sessions I go to every month. Life is really shitty, and I have no desire to actually do anything with mine. Never thought I'd make it this far, as much of a cliche as that is. The only reason I really stick around anymore is because I don't want to hurt my family. But I often think about how amazing it would be to just go to bed one night and then never wake up again. TLDR, I was weird and now I'm dead inside. I wonder if I was the weird kid. Had few, if any, friends in elementary school. I didn't know it at the time, but my parents had me tested for the usual spectrum stuff, but it came back negative. Of course, this was probably 92 or 93. Middle school wasn't much better. I had started orchestra in elementary and kept going. In 7th grade, our home ec class was spread out in the classroom early in the morning, and we found out about the September 11th attacks. I still remember their full names, but OBV won't post them. But Courtney and Misty both said they wished I was on one of the planes. Was just trying to sew some shorts. Man. Was still in orchestra in high school, and was admitted to the advanced orchestra as a freshman, which was a rarity apparently. But instead of learning from more experienced people, the cliques, SP, took turns berating me, asking me if I thought I was better than them, because I got in at a younger age. I just wiled off everything, eventually made it to first chair, but realized I was so not able to handle responsibility. One of my section mates' friend came up, in front of the teacher, and said she wished I would die, so her freedie would get first chair. Teacher laughed. Senior year he told me he always regretted letting me in early. From elementary to high school I would always shift between being as isolated as possible to lashing out at people for being shitty, which in turn spawned more people being shitty. Anytime I would try and let go and just go to a school social function, I usually got the shit kicked out of me. All through school my refuges were video games and my dogs. We always had German shepherds and they were always my best friends. I loved them, and they loved me. Snuggling while playing SNES, or going with my family to take them to big fields to play, are some of my favorite memories. People found out about my dogs, but few were brave enough to go up against a German shepherd. One would hurl cinder blocks at the dogs, but they would easily avoid them. College was nice. A lot of anonymity, SP, and when I ran into people I knew from back when, we would avoid one another, or if they acted like we were buddies back then, I would repulse them as hard as I could. So I continued to be that guy who didn't talk much. If he did, it was inelegant as fuck. Always reading or gaming on the charity laptop I got when enrolled. Oddly enough, a woman I met in astronomy class took an interest in me, and she was very pretty. But after 2 decades of a woman flirting with me always being a dare or practical joke, I didn't reciprocate for the longest time. She was my first and only romantic partner, and that was in 2007. I found out later she liked guys with no self-worth, because we tended to do more things for her. I didn't realize that at the time. Back then, she was just a pretty girl who liked that I had Guitar Hero. Had sex twice before I found out she actually had a boyfriend, a Marine, back home. She told me she was the only girl who was going to put up with me, and she had to be drunk to do it. After that, I stopped caring. For the last 12 years I've worked the same job, same position, since they only hire outside the organization for higher up positions. I strongly dislike most of my coworkers. It's a mostly female profession, so I'm one of few males in the building, let alone the department. The women form cliques and force a ton of office politics and backbiting, and recently, very much against my will, I've been drawn into it. My boss knows I'm alive and let live guy, because honestly, I don't care. A monkey could do my job and I don't like who I work with. I've only stuck around to get as many years as I have to work on a retirement fund. I'm absolutely sure the saying of if you smell shit everywhere you go, check the bottom of your shoes. So I know I'm contributing to people not liking me. I just never figured out what it is. In a new place I always try to be nice and helpful, but I've been told I give off a weird vibe. I mainly want to get in, put in my 10 to 12 hours and go home. At least once a week, I visit my parents for dinner and a small visit. It always boosts my spirits. They don't judge me like the rest of my family does. They're career military and usually huge assholes about how they do the hard stuff. So people like me can fuck up our lives and the country. Seriously, fat military people faking hero complexes. Others are actually prominent in TV news. Two are actually religious leaders, one a pastor, the other a priest. But they disowned any family ties we had when they found out I'm atheist. Surprise surprise, a redditor is an atheist. Honestly, I'm just doing what I gotta do to enjoy the limited time I get to spend with my parents. Eventually, they'll be gone. If there are any dogs left, I will spoil them rotten and make them as happy as possible as long as they live. Dogs give pure love. No guile, no deceit, just pure surface love. They love us more than they love themselves. But the day after everyone has been put to rest is the day I walk into the woods nearby with the shotgun my parents have for home defense. Train runs by it with a ditch that has lots of storm drains. Place already reeks, so no one will notice, and I won't hurt the family that cares about me since they are already gone. So yeah, and view/rant from the weird kid in school. I don't expect anyone to read that many paragraphs that doesn't have a TLDR at the end, but it felt kinda good to write. The kid in our high school was always an oddball, jutted into conversations with people to talk about random stuff like a story about him or a show. People weren't very nice to the guy. I kinda avoided him, but ended up seeing him out when we became peer ministers together senior year. Peer ministry is a group of students who run retreats, charity stuff, and events like field day for the school. On the retreats we lead for the sophomores. One peer minister would give a speech about hard times in their life and how they overcame it. This kid got up to the podium, maybe 50 sophomores and 5 peer ministers all watching and snickering, and told us his story that made just about everyone tear up at best point. When he was in 8th grade, his father killed mother, wounded him and left him for dead, then died in a standoff with cops. Suicide by cop. This kid suffers from PTSD, and whenever he has it flare up he runs to talk to someone and just starts talking to get it out of his head. He choked up and could finish his speech, and no one could really move. Everyone in school was much nicer to him from then on. Now, this kid grew up into a frickin' man. Graduated one of the top in his class from the Coast Guard Academy, and is working in becoming Coast Guard rescue helicopter pilot. He wants to be a lifestyle pilot as that's what/who saved him when he was hurt. I was the weird kid. I was weird because my wealthy family abused me to the point the doctors say that be a 99% functional person is inconceivable, since they have studied people who became mass murderers while dealing with less than me. 10 years ago I went to work and met a young woman who I hit it off real well with, and it turned out she was playing the mean girl prank where you totally pretend to like a guy and when they ask you out you just utterly destroy them. At the time I was dealing with health issues that the stress of what she did nearly caused me to die. I've become really a shut-in because it seems like everywhere I go I run into our former co-workers who ask me about her. One of them has to be told every time I see her that there was nothing going on worse than that I run into her sister pretty much every month, and even ironically her mom a few months back. My abusive mom lost her mind after my stepfather died and told me to my face that she had me diagnosed as a bipolar because she was too good to work and we needed the monthly check to pay the bills. So I basically suffered inhuman pain, permanent physical injuries, and was for all intents and purposes chemically tortured because she was too lazy to work. I reconnected with my dad who, because of my mom's lies and my wealthy family's connections, I was basically raised by my kidnapper, and he is pretty much all I have in the world. What few friends I had abandoned me when I tried to reconnect after I got well enough to reconnect to the world. I've been basically alone for my entire adult life. No one wants to go out with me because everyone is taken, paired up or not compatible. My mentally retarded brother drained our family's wealth because my grandparents wouldn't tell him no to anything, while they left me to starve and feed myself on a $125 worth of food stamps a month. I work, I go home, and occasionally I find another lost soul I give advice to help them avoid my fate. Lately I've been imagining running away from my life and responsibilities and living on the beach as a crazy bum, but I haven't got the balls to abandon everything and run away. I was the weird kid, third from last on the social food chain in middle school, a closeted nerd who used to have a fairly strong social circle in elementary school, but grew isolated from these friends unintentionally. When I figured out I was into dudes, my dad worked graveyard and was a very angry man. Almost every interaction I had with him was negative. He would constantly put me down, saying that my teeth were yellow or that I stank and needed a shower. My self-image / confidence imploded, and I buried myself into video games, neglecting school and in-person interactions. My grades obviously suffered because I didn't care and would get me grounded from my one escape. All of this led me to being a very weird kid. I wore the same heavy blue coat every day all the time, leading to a sweaty, stinky me. I didn't know anything about what the other kids were talking about or thought were cool. I was always scared to talk to anyone because I thought they'd figure out I was gay and I'd get beaten up. Late at night, I'd sit in the kitchen and weigh the cost of taking my life while staring at some of the kitchen knives. I eventually made a couple of friends who didn't realize they were saving my life. I made it through middle school and ended up going to a high school in a different city. Things improved enough there for me to finish without major incident. Eventually I went to college, found myself, and ended up with the extremely tight-knit group of friends I have now that I wouldn't trade for anything. I just graduated with my manuscript in counseling and student affairs, and I'm going to start my career helping kids / young adults through their college education. I was the weird kid, always trying to make myself look different, wearing clearance clothing from Hot Topic and dyeing my hair stupid colors. Always smart, but never tried hard during high school. My GPA was not very good. Also had a lot of emotional issues after high school, became a barista, and tried the community college thing. Always withdrew due to my issues or work or exhaustion. Drifted from job to job after that, continually lost. I eventually became dependent upon alcohol. I moved away twice, but always came back to my hometown. Finally, I ended up getting the DUI to end all DUIs. Was in a court program for almost 2 years. Got therapy, got a better diagnosis, but I still struggled. Eventually, towards the end of my last relationship, I decided to get sober for good. It's been 126 days. Because of how my relationship ended, I decided I needed to change point. While I'd started back at school about 2 years prior, I wasn't taking care of myself mentally or physically. So, I started back up with therapy, got new meds, I'm looking into a new diagnosis, I started taking my side projects more seriously, got a better job, and I'm volunteering. I'm hoping to actually have a big girl job in the next few years, but I'm okay with everything for now. It's a transitionary period ATM, but I'm finally growing the hell up point, so I'm still crazy, but it's starting to go from bad crazy to good crazy. I'm hoping I can eventually help others like myself, but for now, I have to focus on me. Some of my volunteer work touches on it, though, which is fulfilling. Joined Reddit a few months ago and this is my first post, so please bear with me lol. Had a kid that rode the same bus as me all 4 years in high school. He always sat at the very first seat on the bus. He was super into anime, which at my HS was social suicide. He told everyone he was half dragon. He also made up a dragon name and only answered to it. He grew his nails out a good amount and would sharpen them into points like claws. He dyed his hair jet black. He always used a fake deep voice when talking to anyone, but occasionally he'd slip up and you would hear his real voice, which was much higher pitched than his fake one. He ran like everyone in Naruto. If you've never watched Naruto, just Google it and you won't be disappointed. In 10th grade he made a cardboard katana and carried it everywhere he went. He was never mean to anyone unless they tried to pick on them. His response to any teasing was to hiss at them like a snake and brandish his claws. It worked like a charm every time, because eventually everyone just let him do his own thing. Nothing extremely weird like some of these, but just weird enough to be known as the weird kid to the whole school. You could go up to anyone, and they all knew exactly who you were talking about. Ran into him a few years ago at a gas station. He is still very weird and still uses his fake voice. Still uses his dragon name for everything. Looked him up on Facebook and all he posts is anime stuff or pictures with his sword and knife collections. No signs of him being in a relationship since high school. Also, just so y'all don't think I'm bashing on anime, I love anime lol. I'm not sure this applies, but I went to a weird high school that specialized in math and physics, had a hard entrance exam, filled with people with rewards from international competitions. It accepts around 100 kids a year, separated in classes of 20 and one of the classes was meant for the best students, and had a slightly different program, and the two people I'm going to talk about are from that class. So no surprise that the school was filled with really weird people. But we were lucky, because small classes and everyone being weird prevented a lot of bullying that would happen in a larger school. So there was this girl that kept to herself from the beginning, but as time went on she retreated farther and farther into herself, stopped bathing, smelled to high heavens, etc. She was just super depressed. One of the reasons for that looked like her family inadvertently were putting her under a lot of pressure to succeed, and she couldn't cope with that. During the last year of high school she got help, got her degree with her the 9th of September 10, and is currently in Switzerland doing her masters. The other story is about a guy who had just a faked up family life. He had a really weird sense of humor and poor impulse control, played games all the time, barely finished high school, but managed to get in a decent college because couple of classmates helped him for a week or so. He ended up dropping out, changing colleges a few times, dropping out completely after 2 years. Got kicked out of his house by his parents, became an addict, and lived on the streets for a while, got his teeth broken in fight. After that his parents found him, let him move back in on the condition he fixes his sheet. Last time I saw him, he was clean for a few months, got his teeth fixed, and is taking a programming course. No happy ending for this one yet, but on a right track I hope. He wasn't weird, but mainly a foreign student. His first language is Vietnamese and his English isn't that good. Even though I was born in America, my first language is Spanish, and didn't speak English till I was like 11 years old, so I understood his predicament. I remember him being picked on in my chemistry class, and I felt bad, because I really didn't do anything to stop it. He took it like a champ, and never showed weakness. We also had JROTC together, and he excelled in that. Always the first to answer, always knew his ranks, his marches. He showed real leadership in that class. I was in grade 12, and he was in grade 10. I was a cadet captain company so he was barely there one semester, and I saw him move from no rank to cadet master sergeant. He took up some extra activities and he 100% deserved those promotions. I saw big leadership potential in him. At the time we meet I'm 21 years old and been working at my second ever job for 2 years, a famous auto parts store. I have no car, making sheet money, and getting screwed over every day. In comes this swell guy as I was putting stuff away and restocking the shelves. He goes, "Dude, I remember you." And it takes me a second to register that it was the scrawny Vietnamese kid from school. We catch up, talk, I ask him what's he been up to, and he says that he joined the Marines at 18 and showed me his car, a sweet Challenger. We caught up, and I helped him out, and I say to him, "Congratulations, and keep it up. You're no longer that small kid from school. You're a grown-ass man now. Take care." I probably fit the bill for this. I was a shitty emo kid with blue hair and a severe self-harm problem. Everyone knew. I regularly bled through long sleeves, and once or twice I got rolling on pills in the bathroom and slashed myself up at school. I also had an eating disorder and looked every bit like it. I also carried a faking briefcase instead of a backpack and wore an oversized trench coat. Guys, a faking briefcase. I'm sure my teachers thought I was gonna shoot the place up. I was committed to a psychiatric hospital for the self-mutilation thing and pretty much dropped off the map. I still encounter people from school who are surprised that I'm alive because I don't have any social media and it's just about impossible to track me down unless I want to talk to you. I was finally able to escape a remarkably shitty home life by moving out at 16, and things got better for me after that. I was diagnosed with PTSD and a big dollop of body dysmorphic disorder. I have trouble keeping up with therapy, but I'm much better than I used to be. I'm at a healthy weight and I've been mostly sober and self-harm free for a couple years. Nowadays I work in a vet clinic, and I foster and rehab all kinds of animals whenever I get the opportunity. I haven't been to college, but I'm working on my JED, which I never thought I'd live long enough to do. Life's not perfect, but it's better than I expected, and I still get a kick out of the looks that old acquaintances give me when they run into me in public for the first time since middle school. Seriously, people are shocked that I'm alive. I guess I'm too. Looking back on things, I was the weird kid. My family moved around a lot before settling down in the most suburban town ever. I always struggled to make lasting friendships. Now that I'm older, I understand why. My mom was a hoarder and I could never have people at my house. We also had a lot of pets, so my clothes probably stank. She never did laundry. She's better now, and my dad has offered to pay for my therapy. In high school I started experimenting with drugs and smoked pot daily to escape my reality. Mom was also hardcore religious and imposed insane curfews, 9 PM on a Saturday night for a 17-year-old, so I snuck out and rebelled against them a lot. Fell in with a bad crowd, who I mostly have cut ties with. Turns out, many of them are living in the trailer park in the next town over. I ended up dropping out of high school and moving out at 18. Thanks to supportive boyfriends throughout the last 10 years, I went to get my JED and have been taking college courses on and off. I have a fairly respectable job in an office and have been volunteering with several charitable organizations for years. I met another weirdo, but he's a popular guy. It's nice to have his friends in my life, since I don't have many of my own. He has a similar background, but his parents died when he was young and my own parents have taken him in. We've been together for 8 years and I also supported him to get his JED. We are doing okay. Still smoking pot and pissing all our money away on going to concerts. I quit recently though, as we are expecting our first child at the end of the year. Our house is fairly clean, but can get out of hand sometimes. I make a conscious effort not to hoard and make sure my partner doesn't. I still have nightmares about living in hoarded spaces. Clean your houses, people. This is my first post, so bear with me. I was the weird kid in my high school, liked anime a little too much, called Erratic because of my high voice, and also openly talked about witchcraft sometimes. I either had braids, which I hated, because they were called worms or snakes in school, or that weird vaguely Marilyn Monroe / mushroom cloud hair that my mom would flat iron it into. I also used to date a guy who dropped out at 15, but I also was made fun of for dating him too, since he wore the same jacket every day, and he smelled weird. So, yeah. I eventually was pushed into college, and then dropped out a year later, because I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do, and I was getting really depressed and anxious. I did have some suicidal attempts, and it turns out I was bipolar. My mom decided she was done with my hysterics. So I moved out to Vegas for a few months and met my boyfriend. After Vegas, I had to move back in with my mom again since I lost my job and could not find a second one quick enough. And I was sent into another manic cycle. So for half a year I saved up, moved in with some friends, and then moved in with said boyfriend. Now I'm going back to school for software engineering, celebrated our first wedding anniversary with my now husband, and learned to love my skin, hair, voice, and self. I'm slowly breaking out of my shyness due to my voice with meetups, and started volunteering more. Honestly, I'm in the happiest point of my life right now. It feels like I'm going forward for once. There's a lot of what the fuck and comic justice in here. I don't have any stories about weird kids. You could say I was a weird kid in school, but I don't think I was that weird, just kind of awkward and stuck up, as are all middle schoolers in a religious private school to some extent. My thing was I was always drawing, and then also writing, but that was cool ATM, so there was a writing group in class and we also drew. I was with all the girls that disliked me, girls who would mess with my stuff, whether I was there or not, and because their queen liked me, they were generally nice to me. Then some girl whose parents were from Spain, so she had really pale skin and auburn hair and really faked up teeth transferred. All the girls were fighting to be her friend, so they left alone drawing and writing, because they were only interested in whatever she was interested, and not in what the other girl was. Me and the other girls kept drawing and writing stories, and we hung out, and looked at clouds, and talked about how the school could be much cooler, if only it were more like Hogwarts. I never had too much trouble. I got into a lot of fights, usually with older boys who did actually mess with me a lot more than they would mess with younger kids in general. A couple of times groups of kids jumped me and stole my stuff and such to get me to fight. Most of the time they would call up a teacher or something, because apparently they couldn't beat me. I don't know if they were going easy on me. Later I would play table games with 3 kids who were also goofy, but everyone liked them cause they were cool, and their names all started with J, so I called them Tree J. The smartest 1/3 thought my word coding that I was obsessed with was cool, so he started using it, and then everyone in class started using it thinking he had invented it. He told everyone it was mine, but nobody cared and attributed it to him. The video game / cartoons kid was the cousin of some beach who hated me for some reason, but he was cool and talked and played with me all the time. He was best friends with a kid that every girl in my class, and also some from other classes and grades, was obsessed with, and he and the other 1/3 kept teasing him about it, but otherwise he was a quiet kid who maybe liked biology way too much. He had a couple of tricks with Rubik cubes and cards and everyone thought he was a genius. He learned those tricks from smartest J though. I had a bunch of table games, so we played together, except when they played cards, because I wasn't as good as them, and was also a sore loser, so I didn't want any of that to beat me, so I wouldn't get angry. And mean point in high school I also had drawing friends and game friends, and I got a lot of commissions, because people liked my drawings and I became drawing girl. There was a kid who was obsessed with anatomy and he would correct my stuff all the time and I was super annoyed. The other kid cared more about music and was more chill. One of them liked some girl, and I set them up to date. Last I knew they were still dating after we graduated. As for me, I started working, moved to another country, had psychosis, and I'm still going to college after 9 years and several psych ward stays, and suicide attempts. Everything is fine with me. I've accepted the development of events in my life, and am less competitive and better at losing now. TLDR, I was kinda weird, but also hung out with the cool kids, because they were into all the same stuff I was into. My life turned out okay. I had a friend in middle school. We were sort of raised together by our divorced / single mothers who met in college. Our families lived together during middle school, and she had a lot of issues. She would steal, even steal from me. Worst was when she stole all the $2 bills and silver dollars my family had given me for birthdays over my lifetime, and spent them at the dollar store. She also had a weird obsession with being popular. Once she shaved her sideburns awkwardly, so she could be like the popular crowd, and similarly did the same with her eyebrows. It was not a good look for her. Her mom was an oddball too. They owned 8 cats and a couple dogs, and she and my mom eventually had a falling out, so when my mom moved out we never spoke again through all of high school into adulthood, until one day we connected again through Facebook. I met up with her once to see how she turned out. She enjoyed telling me how popular she was in high school and had the craziest and fattest high-pitched girly laugh. It was really off-putting. I don't know how she could have been truly popular considering it was odd. She also wore pretty heavy caked on makeup and was into the plur/race scene. I kept her as a Facebook friend out of curiosity, but didn't make big efforts to see her again, because we are just clearly very different people. Now she is trying to kickstart a /GoFundMe makeup channel she wants to start on YouTube, but her makeup skills are very poor, and she has no content yet, especially nothing of quality. Horrible lighting and grainy images abound. It's a little sad. She keeps saying she has products / guests lined up though, etc. I'm that weird kid. Well, not the weird kid. I was like a B-list weirdo. I went to school in cheap, never been in style clothes. I had terrible personal hygiene and no social skills. It won't come as a shock to say that my home life was completely unstable and full of unintentional neglect. For a long time I was very resentful of the fact, but getting older has earned me a little perspective. My grandparents were horrifyingly abusive, and every generation previous was worse. Nazi pedophile, all I'm saying. My own parents were far better than their own, and did a much better job than anyone could have expected given the circumstances. School was always a horrible place for me. My first grade teacher bullied me, and so did one of the carriage drivers at the after school program. Both of them were fired, but it really set the tone and my expectations for the rest of my school life. My peers bullied me relentlessly, but thankfully those two were the only adults. Rather, most teachers took one look at me and said I wouldn't touch that hot mess with a 10-foot pole point, and then I left. I dropped out of school at 17 to see what the real world could offer me. I traded neglect for indifference, and I couldn't have been happier. What really killed me in school was that I could never understand what anyone wanted. Why was everyone else so happy? Why did even my friends treat me like shit? Well, in the real world everyone wants something from me. If they get it, they like me. If they don't, they don't. It's so simple and straightforward. I can't even be mad when someone doesn't like me. When no one cared who I was, it became easy to be me. I had the space and freedom to grow into a better, more fully realized person. How did I turn out? Well, my dream in life was to have a partner who loves and respects me and will go through life at my side. I want to experience life and art with them and share passions. I have that. I suppose there are bigger mountains and higher peaks, but this is the one I wanted to conquer. I went to middle and high school with this one guy who was always super quiet, kept to himself, and barely had any friends. Apparently, he got bullied in high school, but I didn't notice because we weren't in the same homeroom or took any classes together. Other guys would always try and talk to him, but he would never reciprocate. I'm just guessing he was bullied because he didn't care for friends. We were friends on Facebook, which didn't mean anything to me, but it was nice to see what he was up to. However, he got weird and took a vacation in Vegas and posted a status how much of a great time he had, faked a lot of beautiful women, and won a decent amount of money. I didn't care and thought whatever. Not long after his trip, he sent a horrible private message to a girl we went to high school with, basically harassing her, and blamed her male friends for bullying him. At the time, I had a friend who defended him and said, well, they were mean to him and she's wrong for putting his message out like that for others to see. I disagreed. About a year or so later, I had a friend who died that we went to high school with in December 2015. New Year's Eve came, and I look at my phone to see a message he sent me on Facebook. Now, I never spoke to him ever in my life, not once. I had seen him on the bus a few times, but never said hi. I opened the message, and it was him going completely off on me. He called me a hoe, slut, claiming he's a full-grown man who fucks any women he wants, but wouldn't make an exception to some ugly ads like me. I didn't want him, and ended it by telling me it should been me who died instead of my friend. He immediately blocked me after he sent it, so I couldn't even message him back. I blasted him on Facebook by posting the screenshot and reported it to the police with the other girl he did it to. He won't be welcomed if he shows up at our reunion. I was that weird kid. When I was around 12, my mom had just decided to move back to South Carolina after just moving from Missouri. Though I was somewhat of a target for bullying there, it never got as bad as it did when I went to middle school for the first time. I will admit, I was a bit of a weird kid. I was very well spoken, still am, and a lot of adults would describe me as a precocious child. I was very mature for my age, and because of that, many kids would use me as a target for their abuse. Whenever I raises my hand to ask a question, kids always felt the need to call me a smartass or a know-it-all. They used words much worse than that. The bullying would have been more tolerable had I not had such fake friends, and had teachers actually decided to step in and stop the bullying. To show how awful it was, I will name a couple odd things that happened. 1. A girl hit me on my head after I told her that she could not tell me what to do. It went unreported. 2. I was perpetually bullied by my math teacher along with my class. She said I would never amount to anything. 3. A girl and her entourage stalked and assaulted me during gym class, and after I defended myself, I was expelled. Thanks no tolerance rule. After that, I was subjected to more bullying when I went to an alternative school to erase the criminal charges off my record. As the years went by, I developed a bunch of mental disorders and self-harm scars trying to punish myself for how I let those people hurt me. I'm still not better, and no matter how many achievements I gain, I can still never allow myself to be happy. That weird kid is still suffering, 4 years later. Parents, if you can, please listen to your kids if they say they are being bullied, because it means the world to them to have someone listen. I actually dated one of the 2 weird kids. Well, not 2. In short, if you had a disability, you were a weird kid. Like Wentworth like in high school, and it was cliquey as hell. So let's see if I can tell this story without getting downvoted this time. He basically forced me to be his girlfriend. Just took me down the school halls showing me off like I was a toy. Now, at the time, I was your average autistic and naive retard who didn't know how the fuck love worked. So I went along with it thinking, "K-brap, you'll stop eventually. I'm not faking interesting." He had autism too, and had horrific hygiene. I can name only one person who had a worse stench than he had. He was living in poverty, in a small house by the river with no laundromat to walk to, and no car. He could work at the Subway or Domino's down the road, but I don't think any manager would want to hire him in his condition. Nope. It went on for the entire school year. To the point where he had a fight with my ex-boyfriend, whom at the time was dating my best friend. To be fair, he was a furry, so, yeah, I was that retarded. There was a whole kiss and throw up situation, where he thought it would be okay to French kiss me. He still managed to graduate and go off to college. Years later I'm going to the Apple store with my cousin, to get her iPhone repaired. As she chats at the Genius bar I decide to play on a Mac computer in the store. My eye catches some dude speaking to an employee, and right away I recognize the voice as my ex-boyfriend. Hi, do you have any employment opportunities open? You'd have to speak to someone at the Genius bar, or if you go online, you can fill out an application. So, I call out his name, and we catch ourselves up on current events, and what was happening. Turns out he dropped out of college. I don't know where he's living now. Downvotes ahoy. I'll chime in. I have a pertinent story for once. So my sophomore year of high school, we had this new kid in class. We called him Dougal. He looked nice enough, but he started acting weird almost right off the bat. Acted paranoid when people tried to say hello. Made weird comments both in class and out about girls. Very socially awkward. Still thought he was hot shit for some reason. He was completely delusional. He started fights with guys about twice his size, despite being very thin. Lost all the time. His behavior degenerated to the point that the dean of students had to babysit him during lunch, so he wouldn't get into fights with people. He had no friends. Jokes started going around that he was the shooter type. The faculty made him sit at the table as my group of buddies. We were the quiet nerds, but we're all still involved in sports, cross country, soccer, track mainly. Dougal affectionately named us the Unheard and didn't want to sit with us, which was fine by my group. We talked to the staff and he went back to being babysat by the dean, riding shotgun in the dean's golf cart during lunch looking sullen. He finally got the boot after a few more fights, during which he got suspended both on campus and at home, and finally got expelled. He came to school with FAC, school name, written on his face in red Sharpie, except he faked it up and wrote it backwards. I guess he did it in a mirror. That was the last we heard of him for a few months, until he shows up to our league finals track meet. He was trying to fight a buddy of mine I did soccer and pole vault with. Dougal thought this friend had stolen the girl he liked. Friend sat with her group at lunch, wasn't interested. Luckily he got caught by security and ejected from campus, and we won finals. We also learned that at the school he transferred from my sophomore year he had a restraining order filed against him by a girl he was stalking. Real charmer. Time skip through a few semesters of undergrad, and he popped up in the news. The legend continues. 1, 2, 3 TLDR. He got arrested on hate crime charges, repeatedly violated his restraining order, has served some jail time, and got involved with the alt-right. His parents are rich enough to bail him out repeatedly. He's a real charmer. He also started aggressively memeing me and several other alumni when we were discussing one of the articles last spring. So, really weird guy. We'll call him Bobby. He was from a pretty poor family. He was like a borderline gigallo. He never wore clown face paint or anything like that though. Always stank. Like seriously, people would have to demand they not sit next to him in class all the time because it was just a foul combination of beau with underlying tones of poo. He actually didn't act super weird. He wasn't normal by any means, but he never jacked off in class, or picked his nose, and ate it, or talked to himself. He was just a poor kid with a bad taste in music who smelled really bad, and also had a really bad sense of humor. He was a bigger guy as well, not huge, but bigger than most, and he loved to roughhouse, well into 12th grade. If you were so much as nice to him one day, he'd want to be your friend, and he showed his friendship through putting you in a smelly headlock and trying to wrestle you to the ground. Well, he ended up killing his little sister the last year of high school and almost killing his little brother. The story he gave is he was cleaning his gun, it went off accidentally, and the bullet went through his brother's chest and into his sister's head. One bullet. I don't know what the fuck happened, and I feel like this is some personally identifying shit, because if you went to school with him at the time you're probably reading this going yep, that's way too specific of a case to be anyone else but Bobby. He got not sympathy from most people, including myself. I don't know how that shit happens, but it's either murder or incredibly stupid negligence. He was caught running away from his house after it happened. Well, he got out of jail like a year after it happened. Don't ask me how the fuck that happened. And he works construction. I don't really have an answer to the how did he turn out, because he still smells like as when I was back in town and behind him at the gas station. The closest story I have to this still bums me out. He was actually a friend of mine, but he was pretty socially awkward. He was by far the smartest kid in our high school, and we all figured he would succeed, but he was physically inactive and overweight, and obsessed with video games and wrestling. He went to the same college that I did, and I kept in touch with him for our first 2 years, but I was taking classes for a degree in medical imaging, and he went into a journalism degree with minor in Japanese, because he wanted to work for video game magazines reviewing games, so we never shared any classes and drifted apart. I ended up moving to the medical college complex for my university and lost touch with him. Fast forward 10 years later, and I ran into him again. We chatted for like 10 minutes, in which he told me had graduated with his journalism degree, but the dean of the college told him he didn't take the right classes and would never get a job, but I'm not sure I believe that. He had been living with his mom after school, but she had passed away, and he was living in an apartment with his aunt. He worked as a cashier at a sporting goods store and spent most of his income on video games still. He did not seem really happy, and it really bummed me out that the smartest person I knew just never really applied himself when he got to college to put his intellect to use and simply tried to get a job playing video games and writing about it. I'm not bashing video game reviewers at all, but I believe his only motivation was simply to get paid to play games. TLDR. Smart kid in high school gets lazy in college and becomes overeducated retail cashier. Of course I'm too late, but whatever. We had a good one point. This guy was in a grade higher than me, but we all knew about him. Very different. He had some similar friends, but he was the outcast in their group too, which added like an extra layer to everything. Anytime someone would say his name, he'd reply, "That'd be me." Anyways, big things that happened were he was once suspended for bringing baby powder to school and throwing it on people and telling them he just cursed them, and the biggest was he planned to commit suicide at the school during lunch, told a friend, brought the gun to school, and was detained immediately because a friend tipped them off. He was taken out of the school and I never saw him again. For the rest of my time in high school, everyone would skip on the anniversary of the day he brought the pistol to school, and we called it that guy's name day. Fast forward a few years, I'm in pizza delivery, he gets hired. I doubt this guy remembered me at all, so I just never brought school up. I did however meet with my managers after he left to let them know. First conversation went down like this: me, what's up? Him, not a lot. Getting ready to start recording my country album, starts singing country in a really deep voice. That's pretty cool, man. He lasted about a week, stopped showing up. The end. Kid was always strange since middle school. He had what I can best describe as a Jew fro, except with a bunch of pomade or hairspray that made his hair very shiny/oily. He didn't seem to care what anyone thought about him, especially girls, and would make animal noises in the hallways or say ridiculous, usually sexual or violent, things to people in class, and would make YouTube videos that starred him and his few friends doing I cheat. Like him shirtless going on a rant about how people are sheep, or practicing his velociraptor noises. I also remember his Facebook profile picture for a long time was a self-portrait painting of himself fully nude. He literally painted his penis into the picture and had it as his profile picture. Actually a very good painting, very detailed. I should also note he was amazing at guitar and was quite the metalhead. He must have been the best guitar player in school. Definitely a little genius in him in that department. Anyways, he ended up coming out as transgender while I was away at college. It was weird to see the pics on Facebook considering he always had facial hair and seemed to always be talking about his dick and generally never acted girly. Unfortunately he died maybe a year or two later, from what I heard, was a heroin overdose. Which was also strange considering he never did any drugs in school while the rest of us experimented. I specifically remember him getting his wisdom teeth out and throwing away the pain meds because he could tough out the pain point. Probably the strangest person I've ever met. I could probably find that nude portrait or maybe some of his old YouTube videos if his account is up, if anyone's interested. So this was less years and more months, but I figure it still applies. So this guy, let's call him Dan, he's autistic. He was on that weird level where he's technically high functioning enough to understand what he can get away with, but dumb as enough to go beyond that anyway. I've known him since year 2, and he was the weirdest idiot ever. I don't mean intelligence, I mean plain old belligerence and sometimes nastiness. He would fight whoever was the latest person to say something that irked him, sometimes not even irk, or he'd say the biggest, most provably untrue lies. He came out as being gay 6 or 7 times. He carved the Nazi symbol into his hands. He made suggestive and creepy jokes to whoever was around, and he tried to sound like he was the most erudite bastard ever. Sure was funny when someone flat out proved him wrong though, which made him want to fight them, of course. And he always tried to hide behind his parents or his autism for all of it. That last one pisses me off the most, because our high school had a bigger than usual intake of special needs people, so you could tell when they were real or not, which got up to 11 for me and every one of my group mates as we were all autistic ourselves. He dropped out around halfway through year 11 and everyone is happy for it, even and I suspect especially the teachers. Sorry for ranting. He just really pissed me off. I think I was the weird kid. Not crazy weird but pretty awkward and out of place. I was bullied pretty much my entire grade school life. College was fine. I didn't have a single friend, and the people who were only pretended to be so they could play some kind of prank on me. Boys would put love notes in my locker or something similar, pretending to have a crush on me, again to trick me into another prank and tell me they never liked me in the first place. I ended up seriously distrusting people after a while. In my early teens I eventually learned I liked computers and made random flash games and stuff. Decided to do computer science in college. I also learned a lot of people in that field are weirdos like me, and we shared similar interests and obstacles in life. It didn't help that many of them creeped on me though. Some of them having some kind of vendetta against me and would stalk me, harass me, spread rumors about me, and generally made me feel unsafe. Eventually graduated and got a job, although had a bit of a rough start. Was very depressed and developed a drinking problem. Got fired at various jobs for various reasons. Went to see a therapist and got my shit mostly together. Turned out to be a good decision and ended up making well over 6 figures by age 25. One time I actually met a bully working at a gas station and he literally pumped my gas. It honestly felt really good. Then got into stock trading and made quite a bit from that as well. To this day, I'm still doing really well, at least in the career and finance department, but still battle some personal issues. I'm in my 30s and haven't dated in years. Probably because of being somewhat fearful of men and still have a hard time trusting people. I don't mind being single, but do feel pressured because of being close to my expiration date. I still drink too much, but made some progress, and it isn't nearly as bad as it was then. So, I guess it's not a fairy tale happy ending, but my life in general is fine. I was a weird kid from grade school until the end of high school. I didn't take good care of myself, was extremely depressed, and only had one really good friend. I scribbled in notebooks during class, and people didn't react well to my attempts at conversation. I was a late bloomer, though, and got prettier and more socially adept after leaving my hometown to go to college. People responded more positively to my unusual conversation style. I made a bunch of friends, a lot of whom were also bullied as kids. Like me, after growing up, they also found that the world is more interesting and accepting of strangeness than high school bullies think it should be. Point at the 10-year reunion. All these guys who used to be make fun of me were chatting me up, and girls who used to be mean girls were genuinely interested in my life. It was interesting to see how bullies grow up. Most of them became decent friendly people with good jobs and happy families, although a lot of them were kind of boring. I certainly wasn't interested in any of the guys who thought I might be interested in them, now that I wasn't weird anymore. I found it creepy that they would even try without even a quick apology for being such assholes. When we were younger. Now, I'm still writing and making art. That one good friend is still my best friend, and I'm newly married to a wonderful weird boy who gets me. There are a few other kids who were weird back then who I wish I could look up. They had it even worse than I did, and I hope they are okay. Not exactly ran into, but I think still fits the bill. One of my closest friend's sisters went to a different school and lived in a different town than us growing up. She self-identified as unattractive, awkward and gangly. I can certainly agree with the awkward and gangly part. She was also tremendously kind and forgiving to a fault. Often this forgiveness manifested itself as an acceptance of people treating her like shit. These shitty children she accepted would bully and abuse her incessantly. It got so bad her family changed schools and moved to a different town because they were deeply concerned about her mental health and the repercussions of self-harm. She struggled in social situations and spent as much time as she could hiding in the library during high school or sitting in the corner of a room reading a book as a result. Now fast forward to 10 years after high school, and she is insanely intelligent and wildly attractive. That gangly frame basically turned into a supermodel-like build. She works as a very successful English/writing teacher who uses her past experiences to help other kids. She is published and also received an offer to Duke Law this year. She is still kind and trusting regardless of all that came before, and a big gaming nerd. It's funny to watch her swerve all the passive-aggressive comments and shock and awe reactions from locals when we travel home during summer breaks. Especially the cowards who were cruel to her. Me and my group of friends were the weird kids, and frankly that's why we found each other. We weren't super weird, just shy and nerdy and socially awkward, loved games and anime, but pretty much on the same rung on the social ladder as the special ed students. Sometimes we were bullied. Should also say that we are all Asian American in a school that was mostly Asian American, Bay Area. This is what we are up to 15 years out of high school. Me, moved away for good, law grad working as a paralegal, because I couldn't pass the bar, but shut down all social media, and now there are all these crazy rumors and gossip about me, because no one knows where I've been. I think last I checked, people from my class thought I was dead. One guy was obsessed with anime, and would express his affection for popular girls in our class in really creepy ways. After high school he bounced around a few community colleges before transferring to a state school. Last I heard he was dropping out of a grad program that he didn't really want to be in. Never moved out of his parents' house or his room. Another guy met a similar fate. Got a good degree from a school that's not so great. Couldn't find a job, so he helped out with the family business. Last I heard they were selling the business to go into another business. Both him and the guy above seem fairly content in their lives and retained their love for video games and anime. One guy took a stereotypical nerd path and went into tech and is now probably the most successful out of that group. One guy was a math whiz, went to college for 2 years to study math, but then met with too much pressure from parents and had some kind of nervous breakdown and was never quite the same after that. Ever since he's been unemployed and shuffled between different therapists, doctors and medications. Last I checked he still only plays video games all day in his room, but it's no longer a hobby for him, just a coping mechanism. I guess those are the core group members. Other people who hung with us tangentially were weird too. Some fared better and some worse. You know that idea that if you just keep your head down and study, everything will work out and you'll be rich, while the ex-jocks makes french fries for your kids at the local McDonald's. Don't believe this lie. The bullies win everything in the end. The people who bullies the shit out of unpopular kids from my school all became insanely successful. I was close friends with the weird kid in my neighborhood, well, just outside of the neighborhood. My house was located at the very end of these cul-de-sacs strung together, and his house was in the previous section of cul-de-sacs down the main road. So whenever the kids in my neighborhood would be getting together to go out and do something like riding bikes or playing hide and seek, I would always remember to call Danny. He was homeschooled and lived with his grandma, which I think explains why he was picked on so much when he finally started going to public school in the 9th grade. He had little to no social experience with other people besides his grandma, his neighbor friend, and me up the road. Anyway, from what I hear, he had a real difficult time making friends in high school, so much so that he had to actually transfer schools. I had moved across the country after I finished 8th grade, so I feel like I left Danny alone. I would my hometown during the summer and check up on everyone. They mostly had all grown up and drifted apart from one another. Yet I would skate to each of their houses, knock on their front doors, surprise them, and hang out for the day. Everyone was doing their own thing, especially Danny. It was a long time before he was home. When I was visiting our old neighborhood, eventually one summer he was home, and by this time I was driving my grandma's truck around with my cousin. So I decide to drive to my old neighborhood and just cruise through it to see the changes. Everyone is gone now, the streets are quiet, no kids in sight. So I drive over to Dana's cul-de-sac. Maybe he's faking home this time. It has been too long. I park the car in his driveway. My cousin and I get out. We ring his doorbell, and his grandma opens the door. I give her a big hug and ask how she's been, then ask if Danny is home. "Who is it, Grandma?" A familiar voice yells from the back of the house. Just then I see him and his little brother walking down the hallway together towards me. They've got matching bust haircuts, which Danny always kept his hair short, but never this much. But still, I was happy to see him after all these years. And he was happy to see me until he saw my cousin standing behind me. Then everything got weird. It was like Danny saw something he hated and he was trying to contain it or something. Then we went into his garage, and that's when things started to make sense. There was a Volkswagen Badger bug parked on his driveway, which was no surprise because it had been there for years, another Volkswagen bug beside it, and now one more inside of his garage. I looked around his garage and started noticing these Nazi eagles posted on the walls and eagle stencils piled up on toolboxes. Now I understood why things got so tense when he saw my cousin, because my cousin is not white. Then I looked at my cousin and could tell he wanted to get the fuck out of them immediately, which by this point, so did I. "They banged me from my space," Danny proclaimed. "For what?" I asked. "For posting my art. Those faking idiots, right?" Then I wanted to just come out and ask what the hell this Nazi shit was all about. But I didn't want to with my cousin there because things could have gotten crazy fast. There were guns placed here and there throughout the garage and only one exit since they always locked the main garage door. So I gave Danny a hug. It was awkward, but I had to go and didn't know if I would ever see him again, and we drove off. As soon as we reached the end of Dana Street, my cousin yells to me, "Don't you ever do that to me again." That was scary as fuck. I hadn't seen him in years. How was I supposed to know he become a fucking neo-Nazi? I yell as my cousin is just glaring at me from the passenger seat. "Where we going now?" he asks. "Well, there's this girl I haven't seen since I lived here that wants to hang out. She's got some big titties, too." "Okay." He cheers. "But it's been a while though. They might be giant Nazi titties now." Back in middle school, I knew a kid who had some major issues that separated him from the rest of the weird kids. He had a habit of kicking the back of people's chairs in class, and one day he happened to kick the girl who sat in front of him on her ass. She turned around and asked him why he'd do that, and he just flipped sheet. He started by picking up his T89 calculator and banging it against his desk, then turned it on himself and banged it against his head. Then he started banging his head against his desk, screaming all the while. Our teacher and the whole class was shocked into silence. Another time he was appointed the school ambassador to welcome new kids and give them a tour, and he ended up following one of my friends into the bathroom while guiding him. Stood right next to him while he was taking a piss. Had no concept of personal space. In high school, he had other issues. He insisted that being from India made you Indian, not South Asian. He corrected everyone on the pronunciation of his name, even when they got it right. But thankfully, he kind of mellowed out. He graduated from college and got a job at a call center out in the Dallas area. Although I still find him to be a strange dude, I wish nothing but the best for him. Still will shake my head when I think of all the dumb shit he pulled in school. In middle school and high school, this kid studied art like crazy and became a pretty good artist. He was super weird, but very talented. As high school progressed, he became more and more introverted and would always just sit in a corner by himself and draw. We eventually found out that his sketchbook was full of very high quality hentai images. After that, everyone steered clear of him. About 5 years after high school, a friend messaged me and asked if I had seen Drive. Phil that day, I said that I hadn't and expressed that I would never watch a show like that. They messaged back that I really should watch that episode of Dr. Phil. So I do, and that kid and his current spouse are on that show. He was completely off the deep end and did some things that I could never believe. I don't want to list them because it would be easy to find specifically who I'm talking about. I did what anyone in this situation would do and immediately contacted all of my friends to tell them to watch Dr. Phil. The reactions were amazing. Anyway, after all of that, I thought it was all said and done. Fast forward a couple of years, I get a text from a friend who says he did it again. The text contains a link that takes me to a second Dr. Phil episode in which this guy goes back on with a different woman. Needless to say, his life isn't great right now, but it has made an interesting topic for all of the sane people at reunions. I'm late to the party, but I was the weird kid. At least in junior high. Parents made a damn good amount of money in my early childhood, then split up when I was 8. Neither of them could keep what they had built up, my mom in particular, because she was a mortgage broker and loan officer before the housing market crash. She lost everything. So did he. I stayed with my mom, and from that point on we were moving every couple of months. We got threatening phone calls from my dad frequently. I went to 24 different schools by the time I graduated high school, a few of them more than once. This was all spread out across 3 states. After not having a father figure of any kind for several years, and having had the absolute crap beaten out of me by my dad when I was a child, I ended up being the guy that wore a black hoodie every day. Dead middle of summer, 100 F+ outside, black hoodie. I drew plans to build a trebuchet during classes, claiming I was going to kill my dad with one someday. Got into fights. Threatened a lot of my classmates. All just a plea for attention. Really. By the time I got to high school, I had somehow gone to the same school for a year and a half and actually had some friends. I cleaned up my act. Then I moved schools again when my mom got remarried. Fast forward another year and a half, and I'm back at the first high school. I fought with my mom and stepdad frequently because they let me have no individuality and tried to shove their religion down my throat. I ended up moving out as soon as I turned 17, moving in with my best friend's family. I forgave my father and invited him to my graduation. He came. I ended up moving in with him after another year, and now I'm an electrician. I've moved back to the general area my mom and stepdad live. I'm actually taking care of my stepdad right now, while my mom's out of state for her ministry. He was in the hospital twice in 5 days for heart problems. I should have my journeyman's electrician license in less than a year. I want to return to school and work, both full-time, starting next fall semester. After getting my AS in electrical engineering, I should have my master electrician license, which should grant me near passive income to go get my BS in electrical engineering. The end goal here is to become an acoustical engineer and eventually to actually break into the music recording and mixing industry. I don't think I've done too badly for myself. I was the weird kid. Trust me, I got bullied enough about it. Have met with old bullies, and their reactions are priceless. I'm not trying to just stroke my ego in the following, I promise. I just find the entire situation interesting, and I want to present it to you all. I didn't do any of this, really. It naturally happened because of how the world treated me in my school years, in addition to some personal biological and psychological predispositions. Since high school, 4 years ago, became self-aware, came to face with myself and my demons, and now I'm deeply satisfied with life and the universe every day. When my mind stops trying to ruin it, I'm working an electrical engineering career, while also working on my undergrad. I'm told I'm much further in my EE career than most other 22-year-olds. Due to isolation, I threw my high school mind into engineering 100%. Transitioned from male to female, and according to the same bullies, I'm one sexy motherfucker, apparently. Learned that the negative actions of people are always based in some form of confusion, allowing me a penetrating compassion for others in their worst moments. I've seen that aspect of myself entirely turn people's lives around. Realized that I had what, at the time, was several mental illnesses. Over the course of a very crazy year in and out of psych wards and homelessness, I learned the causes of these issues, quit all psych meds, and learned healthy coping. Now the same psychological and physiological predispositions are not an illness, but a consciously managed source of insight into myself and humanity at large. Have dedicated my life to self-improvement and the concept of know thyself. Have been told I have a great sense of humor, and occasionally, great clarity within my humor. Mostly it's just a lot of puns, though. As for the other weird kids that I hung out with, bullies didn't pick on our gang of weirdos. We were all varying degrees of neurotic, and a large group of that scared them. They went for lone bison to hunt. Some have committed suicide, some close to me, some are still struggling with depression, anxiety, bipolar, etc. Many are amazingly skilled and creative artists, thespians, graphical art, sculpture, music, artistic programming, fantasy writers. Some are alcoholics/drug addicts. A few have woken up to themselves because of their suffering due to their weirdness, and bullying because of it. No matter what, we all still get each other years and years later. Most are highly empathic, almost unwillingly so. We have the best parties. All have an air of humility around them as adults, likely because they know firsthand how much one's ego can hurt another human being. I knew a bunch of weird kids from school. I mean, I was in the weird kid group, so, junior. Used to be weird, bad acne, etc. Band camp kinda guy. Took all that weirdness, learned some circus stuff like fire twirling and fire breathing, shaved his head, built up muscle. Dude is amazing kinds of awesome now. Can't remember his name, but was a druggie then, druggie now, never made anything for himself. Super artistic, kinda crazy girl. Mellowed out, got married, had kids, is still an amazing artist, but only improved herself over time. She's gorgeous and amazing. I feel really privileged to know her. Crazy weird girl who moved to the States in upper school, became a op-ed writer, and makes a regular living in Chicago doing it. Still kinda weird, opinionated, feminist. I'm glad to see she found success. One of the guys who wouldn't talk at all during high school, used a dictation device/text to speech thing to do everything, opened up, ends up being a great conversationalist. MV, weird guy that used to act strange, overweight drama kid. Kids used to tease him about being gay and being in the closet. Ends up he really was gay, and when he finally came out, he lost a ton of weight, was looking really good when I saw him last, but most of all, I haven't ever seen him smile as happily as the day I saw him after he came out. Little Greek ball of muscle. Grew up to be a slightly taller Greek ball of muscle with a mechatronics degree, an amazing wife, and the same sense of humor that made him my best friend in high school. I'd still donate a kidney for that guy. Comparatively speaking, the kids that were doing well didn't do so well after school. Most went into mediocrity. Of the successful ones, SG was probably the closest to successful. She was hot then, became a personal trainer, and is still hot, but married with 3 kids. Pip moved across the country, started teaching, and is an international ambassador now. Still stunningly gorgeous. Our sporty people mostly got injured or chilled out, live a homely life. The really successful kids, top tier, one went on to achieve her dream, but the top 2 boys of my year both dropped out of university twice and eventually just settled for 9 to 5 mediocre jobs. Probably the worst was LR, a kid who used to bully people, picked the wrong fight and was murdered. The strange thing is I knew both the victim and the murderers, knew they did it, they weren't remorseful at all, and they walked away free. Even Google doesn't turn up any results on them. If you Google their names, that's how free they got away with murder. Finally, a special mention to my first girlfriend. Band camp is best camp, of course. She moved across the country, has beautiful kids, that look incredibly similar to how her sister did when we were dating, and we still keep in touch. She's been my sounding board and a great source of inspiration to me my entire life, to do the right things. I've been so astoundingly fortunate to know her for more than half my life now. This was the mid-late 90s. All names have been changed to something similar. I almost always hung out with a group of 4 kids. Let's call us the Gang of 4. This did not include Dayton Zuckerberg, but we became closely associated with him. Dayton was a smart kid, but his sense of humor was misplaced in a 4th-5th grade setting. Dayton was very talkative and animated while he talked, but what was even weirder was his ability to get into trouble for his behavior every time. Looking back on things, it was funny as hell, and I'm glad he was in my class. Actually, even back then, I knew I wanted to be in his class because the dullness of school was interrupted by his shenanigans. Every time weird things he did, he would commonly rant, yell, and or cry, essentially becoming overly dramatic over small things. The girls found him incredibly weird. I think he liked the attention and he would chase them around on the playground while making faces or something. He invented this wrestling move called the ribber tap. He would grope your ribs from behind, then rapidly move his arms up and down, scraping your ribs hard with his fingers while making a sound effect. I must admit that it was pretty effective. Some described it as painful, others said it tickled. Back to the attention with the girls thing. Obviously this ribber tap move being used on girls was a no-no. That's why me and my friends told him to use it on some girls. All of us had a sitting down with the principal over this. He once tried to commit suicide by literally lying down in the middle of the road in front of our school. He once attempted to try to steal from the annual book fair by returning a book he didn't buy, then using the money to try to buy something he actually wanted. He had the money in his hand until some other student told him it was wrong or something, and the teacher came over. No one was able to convince him that it was actually stealing. Years later, in college, I found this Jack's Vista Elementary School reunion page on Facebook, and he was in it. He told us that he surprisingly wasn't dead lol, and that he was in a comedy troupe or band. I can't really remember. I think comedy fits him. Regardless, he was well aware of how weird he was back then, and seems to still have his personality, but is much more mature now. Kid A. We had a kid with some developmental problems due to having health issues as a toddler. Sub-average IQ, could do basic math, and had a hard time reading in year 10th. Weird looking, short with a toothy cartoonish face. He was sociable enough, but lived in a fantasy world. He would tell of all kinds of superhuman feats. He would fall in love with girls on the television and claim they're his girlfriends. They'd sometimes change later to be his cousins, etc. In his 20s I'd meet him, and he'd tell of his high rank in the army. He was gunning to become a general or whatever anyway. I met him years later somewhere, and he told me he was around just visiting his wife's parents. I involuntarily frowned at this one. I would cooperate with a lot of his shit in the past, but making up a wife when you're in your late 20s is no longer cool. Then a stunning blonde came up from behind him and planted a kiss on his cheek. You should have seen the look of sheer schadenfreude on his face when he saw my reaction. I know now that he's a lawyer now, and that he has a wife and kids and a home. Kid B. This kid was also isolated from other children early in his life, due to health issues. He was this weird hunchbacked kid. Looked Quasimodo-like. He spent all his high school days building toy bus and ship models. He was secretly the smartest kid in class, but he didn't give a shit. Would barely submit his exams. At times, when an exam would be really hard, one that no one could solve, he'd put in the effort and be the only one getting a perfect grade when everyone else failed. Otherwise he'd just slack off. He has a really weird sense of humor understood, especially since he'd start snort and drool laughing in the middle of telling any of his weird jokes. Would constantly roam the grounds in a very warm winter coat, even in the middle of summer. He smelled appropriately. Anyway, I met him a few years post graduation, when I was in university, in the cafeteria. His mother worked there as a librarian, and he went there to eat. He was gloomy when I met him. I sat with him, and we had our first normal conversation. Turns out he was just a normal dude when gloomy. Turns out his weird demeanor in high school simply stemmed from being happy. He was happy just to be around other kids, even though we mocked him constantly, and that caused him to use his business sense of humor. All of his quirks were attempts at making us laugh. Without his humor, he could pass for a normal, albeit depressed and weird looking, man. It was one of the saddest realizations of my life. I don't think he has ever made anything of his life. Not sure if anyone is going to read this, but yeah. I used to be the weird kid. In elementary school I used to be the kid that wore my sister's hand-me-down. I'm a man. I used to be made fun of because I came from a relatively non-well-off family. The one thing I remember is my sister used to try and not associate with me because she was with the cool kids or whatever. I remember one time I was like in the 3rd grade or something, and a 6th grader asked me what my parents did and why am I so poor or something like that. Told him and the whole lunchroom laughed. Fast forward to middle school, I was still the weirdo. Though I did pretty good in school till I started getting bullied. Before I got bullied I tried getting A's in my classes. I was that kid that kept to myself, but the stupid kids they put me with pushed me to become depressed and stuff, and when I got home every day I would look for a leaf which was yelling at my dogs and watching TV till I went to sleep. Fast forward to high school, I managed to end up with the exact same bullies from middle school, so my torture didn't end. I would be harassed every single day by these people. As a result I ended up developing a bunch of unhealthy habits of watch TV for hours and not really developing social skills. My last year of high school I guess the bullies grew up and they weren't as bad. I graduated with 2.3 GPA and only applied for community college. I didn't really have friends, and the one girl that I wanted to be mine I stopped talking to her because I became numb. Fast forward to out of high school I gained like 30 pounds instantly and I was working a shitty job that I hate. The people I worked with were dicks and were old ladies that I'm guessing were racist. They all came from Europe at the same time from the same place and were better people to work with. I tried my hand at schooling but became depressed because I didn't have much to look forward to and ended up failing a crap ton of semesters. All I knew was I wanted to be wealthy and become and do something with finance. I ended up having like 3 jobs in a matter of 2 years, each being the same thing. I had like 3+ months worth of lapse employment in between. I was basically a barely functioning human at this point because all I was doing is eating, sleeping, and working. I had nothing going for me. I ended up joining the army, which I currently am in. It changed my outlook and perspective in life. Leaving home have me so much opportunity and I'm an independent person now. I leave the army next year and plan on pursuing my bachelor's in finance. The army helped me see a new world and I'm doing much better and learning more and have a social life now. Though I honestly regret flunking out of college and doing garbage in high school. I still haven't redeveloped my studying skills because I'm too preoccupied with watching YouTube, but I plan on cutting YouTube out of my life and attempt to live more academic and goal-oriented life. I looked up what those people who bullied me are doing in life and I guess this is what happened. P1 decided to go to a drive-thru and try to beat someone up and steal their car. They are currently in jail. P2. Not too sure, but his profile pic is of him putting a pink gun in some girl's mouth and a picture of what seems to be cocaine in a bunch of bags spelling out his name. He hasn't been active for years, been out of high school for about 5 years now. The rest seem to be still doing drugs, trying make it big in a band, or working as some menial employee like at a grocery store. So I get to put a fun input on this. In high school, I was a total shadow and went the whole way through never being noticed by administration. But, in elementary school, and most certainly middle school, I most certainly was the weird kid. However, it wasn't so much odd behavior as social status. I went to what is by far the richest middle school in my city. Real nice school in a real nice neighborhood, with extra funding. I don't know how it works elsewhere, but we did state testing, and the score averages from each school in our city was looked at. Those with the highest scores got more money. At the time they told us that, who cares? Saying that back, I realize how messed up that seems. Should be the other way around. Anyway, in this very rich school, were a lot of privileged, rich kids. And me. I just lived with my mom in an apartment somewhat nearby. I took the city bus to school because we got monthly passes cheap due to us being on financial aid. God bless her heart, she was just getting out of a divorce with my heavily alcoholic stepdad, so things were tight at times, but she always made sure I had food and that I was happy. But at school, there was a clear difference between me and basically everyone else. My first year, I was on the tail end of my emo phase. Yeah, I hit that phase a bit early, but I'm glad I got that out of me earlier. That was clearly unheard of at that school. I was also slowly finding my place as the music lover I'm now. Like the everyday, jeans, band tee, and hoodie kid. Again, still very much made me the odd man out. Now yes, I was a bit of a spaz, liked to drum and tap around a lot, and never liked school, so sitting still was hard for me. Mostly, I just never did my homework, but they alienated me from the rest of the students, being sent to ISS for half the day every day to be forced to do my homework, instead of taking Spanish, French, FCS, woodshop, music, gym, all the fun classes. Especially 7th grade, I didn't have any of those classes. So the tip of the cake was when my mom started dating this really faking amazing guy, easily the nicest human being I've ever met. He was a biker, a handyman, and a huge animal lover and teddy bear. While staying at his house, I found a pretty big switchblade I fancied, so I took it home. After a week or two, I started feeling guilty about taking it without asking, so since it was Friday, we were going to go stay at his house for the weekend, like we usually did, and did head there after school. So I thought I'd just bring it with me, so I could give it back. On the bus on the way to school, there was one other kid that rode it with me, so we talked a decent amount, and were kinda friends. I showed him the knife, since he was the kind of kid that'd show me his pocket knives and brag about weed and stuff. Anyway, we get to school, I do my own thing, and before the first bell even rings, the principal walks up and taps my shoulder and asks me to come into the office. The kid had told instantly, and I was honest and told them I did have a knife and told them why I even had it. Well, it was like a 5 to 6 inch blade on that knife, and the principal and the school cop didn't really care about my story. I was put on diversion and expelled from the school. First kid expelled in something like 10 years. So yeah, I was pretty much the weird kid, and all the other kids were sure to let me know. But anyway, since middle school sucked so horribly, I didn't do anything whatsoever in high school to remain a shadow. And I went the whole 4 years with the admins never knowing who I was. After high school, I started working full-time at the local grocery store, both in the meat department and the kitchen. Eventually I moved to a Ruby Tuesdays to cook, as I realized I really like food. From there I moved to a small bistro for a year, and now, at 20, I have a job cooking at the nicest restaurant in town. It's a members only deal, and the only restaurant in town, not on the ground floor. I'm on the 20th floor, on the top floor of the highest building in town, besides the Capitol building. I also serve part-time there, just because I wanted to learn how to work in all parts of the restaurant. I love coming in and eating at our place because there's not a single kid in my school that could even come and eat here. It makes me feel like for once, I finally have the nicer end of the stick than them. Yeah, I'm a concert junkie, second generation hippie. Yes, I still don't make a lot of money, I mean I'm still cook. And I still don't live too fancy, but I have a real nice job at a real nice place that I love, doing exactly what I love. And growing up, like I did, made me really understand how to be happy without having much stuff. I'm humble, and I like it that way. I don't need a fancy house or fancy car, just something to keep my warm, or cool, and a way to get around. And I haven't been in any sort of legal trouble since middle school. So it's I'm doing pretty well for myself. I bet much better than a lot of my fellow student/teacher expected of me. She was really shy and quiet and immature for her age. Like, one time when we were 17 she invited me to her house and then just wanted to play Barbies with her 12-year-old sister. I had real bad social anxiety and zero friends, so I was weird too, but I tried really hard not to draw attention to myself or to appear weird. She hung out with a couple of the tight-knit dorky but genius girls, so she was doing better than me in the friend department, at least at school. She had these thick bangs that she curled and poofed and put hairspray in a couple times a day. This was in the early 2000s, so this wasn't an in thing anymore. She would ask me at every passing period, how are my bangs? Do they look okay? I didn't see her after high school for a few years, but one day she popped up on AIM and I invited her to grab coffee at a bookstore with myself and a couple guy friends I had made after graduating from a different school. It required some prodding, but she eventually agreed to go. She showed up and was the same really quiet, really bookwormish girl from high school. I got impression that she was still playing dolls. She still had those goddamned bangs. I started chatting about a guy I was seeing. We were 21 at this point, and it came out that she'd still never even held hands with a guy. One of my mates, a very nice/non-threatening bloke, was taking a fancy to her, so we invited her to a small party we were going to later. She said maybe, then totally ghosted me. I've tried Facebook stalking her a couple times and she doesn't have an online presence, so I can't find details into her personal life, but I did find something saying she's a Spanish teacher at a school a few towns over. There was a picture, and she still has those bangs. We're 32 now. In K-12 I was near the bottom of the dog pile. I was fat and always smelled of mold, mildew and cat pee, because my dad was, and is, a hoarder. I had untreated asthma, so I couldn't keep up with other kids playing, and always had to sit out of gym. When I had friends, they couldn't visit me at home, because our home was filthy. I also wasn't allowed to visit them at home, because then we would have been expected to reciprocate. I was also 6 to 12 months younger than everyone else, and had no social skills. Below me were 3 kids. RK, a stutter who was sexually precocious, even though he came from a very religious family. AK, a boy who thought he was smarter than everyone else, had the penmanship of a drunk 4-year-old, publicly picked his nose, and was much too interested in the military, particularly firepower. RS. He didn't make friends, didn't talk, and was held back 2 or 3 times. Things got better for me in college. I learned how to dress, had my physical health conditions better treated, and had the freedom to shower and do laundry whenever I wanted. RK, last I heard, is drumming for some small town band, looks unwashed and ungroomed. AK, fell off the map after 8th grade. His family sent him 3 towns over to the private high school, which was probably necessary. I wouldn't be surprised if he clawed his way slightly higher on the social ladder, but his distasteful personality probably hasn't changed much. RS. He actually managed to go to college and get a degree. It wasn't anything fancy, but he got a decent job. He and his older brother were murdered outside one of our hometown bars by another classmate's younger brother a few days before Christmas this last year. Oh boy, buckle up. I went to a private Christian school in McKinney, Texas. That alone is enough to make the place a nightmare for anyone that doesn't fit into the Bible Belt way of thinking. I was a nightmare, and looking back I realize how often I pushed people away because I wanted to be a suffering loner. I'm on the autism spectrum, but had no idea at the time. Was on medication for ADHD, but I was forgetful and rarely took it on a regular basis. I feel like things would have turned out better for me if I had the guidance and extra attention I needed to combat my autistic tendencies, but the school only had special ed for severe cases, so I was on my own. I could probably write a novel about my experience there, but here are a few highlights. I was a raging weeb and plastered my locker with low quality anime memes and symbols from Naruto, all of which were frequently ripped down by the principal. Any excuse to wear cosplay to school was exploited. Spirit Week, Halloween, ECT, and would frequently wear my hair up in the style of Deidara from Naruto. In an attempt to seem edgy, I practiced Jashinism, a mostly fake religion from Naruto. I wore the official hidden necklace I bought on eBay, and would cut little tallies all down my arms with a sewing needle as a sacrifice. My father ripped me a new one for that. My weird boyfriend at the time spilled the beans. Any group project that I could get away with doing alone, I did by myself, including playing multiple characters in videos for English class, used footage from an anime called Tokyo Mew Mew, Magical Girls, to make a presentation about the pyramids, dubbed it over myself with a shitty headset mic, received in school suspension, and was banned from community service. For starting a fire with matches at an art house we were volunteering at. Ran away from campus and hid under a bridge because I said something absent-mindedly that was construed as racist, and my teacher made fun of me in front of the entire class. Would hold the front door open all morning before class started, singing loudly to myself as people entered. Wasted reams of paper in the library by printing out long articles about Jack the Ripper and read them in class instead of taking notes. Was eventually banned from using the computers after my account was infected with some nasty Borno virus I accidentally gave it trying to play Sudoku online. Called my boyfriend Yasha and asked him to a school dance with a Bleach meme, sang as loudly as possible during choir so everyone could hear how nice my voice was. It really was, but damn. Spent 3 or 4 days in stony silence so I could appear mysterious. Fortunately I managed to make a small group of outcast friends in 10th grade. So I wasn't completely miserable, but by that point my reputation was still sealed. I graduated a total loser. Now, I've moved to New Hampshire, am currently working on my funeral director's license, and am in a happy relationship. I wear makeup, and have lost some of the extra weight I carried in high school. I hope a reunion comes along soon, so I can show off the new me. Our answers from the weird kid. Welcome. I was the weird kid, and I knew it, though I was never sure why. Learned by 3rd grade that things went more smoothly if I didn't talk to anyone outside of class participation. Physically, I was a runt and terrible at gym class activities, but I was otherwise a straight A student. Still got picked on a lot, likely because I marched to my own beat, so to speak. High school was rougher, but in different ways. I wasn't the weirdest kid, and so managed to avoid the weird kid label for my tenure there. However, high school was when I began to realize that my home situation wasn't normal, and that I was developing homosexual tendencies in a Catholic school setting. Shortly before graduation, a few of my elementary school peers approached me and apologized for how I was treated. I have to admit, it felt nice and helped me let go of a little bit of the resentment I didn't realize I had been carrying. Things got both better and worse when I started college. Leaving my home life was big positive change. However, I chose to attend a competitive university for which I was woefully underprepared. I tried so hard to stay above water academically that I had no time for anything else. I was expelled after my first semester. The administration tended to respond with leniency to determined students who had been asked to leave for academic reasons, or at least students who could figure out how to masquerade desperate honors determination. I re-enrolled for the following term and passed the remainder of my first year classes. Barely. Then 4 students and 2 professors killed themselves. Things got weird after that. I remember little between then and my 21st birthday. I remember giving my parents any lame excuse for going back to school as early as possible and for not coming home for the non-required holidays, spring break, Thanksgiving, family birthdays, basically anything that wasn't Christmas and Easter. The student suicide number slowly trickled higher, with 1 or 2 more students departing in that time, and a few more attempting and failing. I have to admit I considered it, but then I met the individual who would eventually become my partner. That was 7 years ago. The rest of college was hard, but manageable. I went on to live what most would consider a normal life. Graduated, got a 9-to-5 job in my field, make enough to live a comfortable, but not extravagant life, while enjoying social hobbies, and supporting my partner through higher education. I don't consider myself a drastically different person than I was when those who surrounded me considered me undesirable. I'm much happier now, even though I have to go through great effort to hide many aspects of my life and identity from my family. I think that, if I were to go back and attend any of my reunions, people would conclude that I turned out normal. I can't for the life of me figure out what changed between then and now. Surely, not all of my classmates had a change of heart, though some did. There must have been something wrong with me back then, some flaw I unintentionally corrected over time. I just wish I knew what it was. Thanks for reading. The weird kid. Where I went to school, half the place was weird kids. University town, lots of kids from double academic families. Today I guess one might think there would be a higher than average number of people on the autistic spectrum. But I digress. So there were lots of banged cheeks, smokers, goths, nerds, and other oddities. To come to mind, there's the weird boy who's now, well, he's still physically male, I think, but has changed his name to something gender neutral, and is definitely not what one would call a classic cisgender male, put it that way. From his internet postings it would seem that he's gone down quite a specific lifestyle and career path. Won't get into details, but from the outside looking in it's pretty non-conventional. Yeah, I know what though. He seems very happy and well adjusted. The other that's worth mentioning is the Banjeek, who founded a certain internet related company that everyone who reads this uses, and is now worth many billions of dollars. Yes, he is a household name. Yes, I have yearbook pics. Yes, at the time you wouldn't have exactly said he'd be a hit with the ladies, but for everyone like those two, and there really were plenty, there are literally 100 who just grew up, went to college, or not, and integrated into society. Some are high-paid engineers, some are gardeners, some stayed at home, some ended up on other continents. None, as far as I know, ended up in jail, or in gangs or what have you. So all in all I'd say we collectively did okay. I was the weird kid. It says so in my yearbook from 5th grade. I'll recount some later years instead, since I don't remember so far back all that well. I took long to mature, was quite childish, and not the best socially. I skipped a grade, so it wasn't easier considering everyone was a year older. I lied about my age and set myself up for some trouble sometimes. I had a goth phase, and was bullied for a while. Liked manga, gaming, the usual. Did okay in school. Eventually, around 9th grade I started maturing, and started to be accepted by my peers. I was apparently still annoying, and weird in school, but they enjoyed hanging out with me outside school. My dad helped me with my schoolwork, and I got a stipend for improving my grades. Came into secondary school / high school / whatever. Less awkward now. Not perfect, wasn't the most popular, but I had friends now. Friends outside school, people I partied with. Helped me express my very social side. Didn't make a great first impression on the class maybe, but during the 3 years I became much more the person I'm today. Now I've wrapped up my first year of medical studies. I have friends. I managed to take care of myself. I try to think I'm a person people enjoy being around. Of course, it's had its ups and downs. I still enjoy gaming, rollerplaying, and all that, but it's on a healthier level on the side of more important things in my life. I was one of the weird kids in high school. Examples: I started a business in middle school selling custom leashes. The school psych tried to get me kicked out at the school before that, because I was obviously psychotic and a threat to others. I regularly slept, or tripped through my first block at one of my high schools. I met my husband my sophomore year and bit him in class. One of the seniors asked me out on the last day of that year, because apparently he knew I was kinky, but not my name. Despite seeing the movie I thought it was a good idea to carry a journal and write about everyone in my class. I was banned from having more than 2 or 3 sheets of paper at a time and having pens. I was accused of being a terrorist because I had a drawing of a burning flag in my desk at the same school like a week after 9/11. That one I actually didn't do. I'm mostly okay now. I went to college a year early and got married, but I didn't think I would live to 21, 25 at the outside, so I didn't bother to plan for after college until like my last year. I had my first daughter while still in college and had a nervous breakdown about a year postpartum, then went to therapy, quit cutting, found out I have epilepsy and ADHD for sure, as opposed to just being useless and lazy like I thought, and then went back to college the next semester. Finished my BA, interviewed for a job I actually like about 2 weeks after graduation, had my second daughter that spring. Then started work on my manuscript that fall. I finished my manuscript 2 years ago. I'm fully medicated, and I can actually think, and my husband and daughters are way more awesome than I deserve. Well, I'm 14, and I did run into the weird kid from last year recently on Facebook. Long story. But I guess I also could have been seen as the weird one myself, because I constantly make jokes, but that's aside the point. So, at my school, nerds don't get made fun of, because the football team sucks, and so does the basketball team. I never really liked either of those, so after 11ish years of soccer, I started doing more martial arts, like I did before, previously judo and karate. I got back into taekwondo and became a state champion of wrestling this year, and although I may have been the weird kid, it wasn't in a bad way. Now I may have been considered weird because I was the only person with 2 adopted siblings, both of which have severe mental disabilities, which meant I had to be 18 when I had just turned 13, and this is hard for a middle schooler. So, I've gotten over this, and one thing that kinda made me uncool was the fact my parents won't let me date till I'm 16, which I'm fine with, but since I'm considered very attractive, spiked blonde hairs, green eyes, very fit, extremely smart, 5 feet 5, 125 pounds, many girls think I'm playing hard to get. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at an early age, but I've worked hard to not let that get in my way. I have done countless hours of speech therapy and undergone surgery to make my mouth have the ability to speak properly, and I can thank my mom all for that. I was never really an outcast for having a disability, because I was always very ahead of my peers due to a very high IQ, which would pay off in my middle school years. During this time, I competed for state championships all over the STEM field and became a school celebrity almost for it. I'm well known by even the faculty at my school because I run multiple webcomics, made EDM/drum and bass music, hack into software, code games, and compete in debate. All of which I've done for the past 3 years, all in the time I've earned my Eagle Scout award along with numerous others of the sort, along with many academic awards now. I volunteer at special ed preschools, run STEM programs, teach others my skills, enjoy spending time with my best friends, support autism awareness full-heartedly, donate to charities, help my mentally depressed mom, and work side jobs to help pay for a car in 2 years. Weird kids and nerds, I promise, do what you love, be your best self, and you'll also go far. His mom died 5 years ago. Since then, he has 3 types of Facebook status: motivational quotes about getting what you want in life, being brave and going for it, and so on. Hoping that the special someone he likes actually likes him back, and other statuses that are meant to gain attraction from a particular girl. How he can't move on from losing his mom, and how every day is a living nightmare where he is completely miserable and can't take it anymore. I went through about 6 months worth of his posts a while back and say these same types of posts every single week. There hasn't been a single week since she died that he hasn't posted a depressing post about her. People comment and how proud she would be of him. I disagree. I think she would be horribly sad that he cannot move on and find happiness and can't even attempt to do that. It was hard to see him post this stuff all the time, and after trying to offer advice on a number of occasions, I had to hide his posts because it was so bad it was making me feel depressed every time I saw them. I mean, I'm not particularly happy either, but I've managed to move on from a lot of my problems. I got 2, both girls. I will refer them at girl 1 and girl 2. Was my senior year in high school. Girl 1 was the smartest girl in school, plain, still wore bell bottoms. This is 1991, was not dating, quiet, and extremely unhygienic. She knew she was smart and would let everyone know this. When we would have group projects in class she would not help and would do her own thing. Anyway, we graduate and move on. I go to college and do my thing. I come back 1 year for summer vacation, and as I'm driving down the street I see a pregnant hooker. The hooker looks familiar, and I do a U-turn to make sure it's not who I think it is. It is. It's the smartest chick in school, who is now a pregnant hooker standing on the corner trying to make some change. After we locked eyes, she ran off behind an Aldi, and I never saw her again. Girl 2 was a sweet, awkward, second to smartest of girl 1. Quiet, a little overweight, and a few years younger than me, and very shy. She was so smart she was taking classes with the seniors, had not dating anyone while in school, and was just a loner. She was eager to make friends and just wanted to belong. I would talk to her a lot when we had literature class together, because we really liked it. She was a freshman. As before, I go off to college and do my thing. Come back from vacation, only to learn she had killed a guy she briefly dated in high school. This would be the first time I had actually heard of school shooting that involved a fatality. Not to mention, someone I knew personally. I sent her a letter back in '95, never got a response. Here's a brief summary of what happened. I was the weird kid in middle school. My hair grows at different rates in different sections. The sides grow really fast and the back grows faster, so if I don't get a haircut I end up with a sort of mullet. And I hated haircuts, so you can imagine the horror. Oh, and I had lots of dandruff. I was really into him. Like, really into him. I'd use broken Japanese in sentences regularly. Constant voice cracks with no sign of my voice deepening. I was a guy and I played the flute in band. I wasn't good at it. I was quite short and skinny. I had zero fashion sense. A common outfit I would be seen in was cargo shorts and an oversized parka. I said weird shit and did weird shit. I was very socially awkward in general. People tended to either avoid me or be polite without really engaging. I only had my close friends from elementary school who have still stuck by me, the dumb bastards. I didn't know how to act around girls. One time at a school dance I was asked to dance, as you do at a dance. So, while she was grooving out to the song I just started bouncing. I just stuck my arms to my sides, went stiff as a board, and started bouncing up and down. I mean, what the fuck. During the class camping trip, while walking through a group of tents I heard a weird noise coming from one of the tents. I walked over and peered in the open flap and saw two of my classmates making out partially undressed. No idea why to this day, but I just sort of stood there and stared. They just looked at me, and I looked at them. They looked at me. I looked at them. I made eye contact, nodded, and kept walking. During the same camping trip, a girl in my class walked up to me while I was standing around doing fuck all. She accused me of spreading some rumor about her and another guy. Now, I didn't spread any rumor, but I did know what she was talking about, so that contributed to me getting freaked out. I stammered for what was probably a full minute before spinning 360 degrees. Yes, 360. I was facing her at the end of the spin, then 180, before sprinting off into the woods. Yeah, I really knew how to deal with pressure. Things are better now, though. I got a haircut, got not skinny by actually exercising, started taking care of myself, stopped saying weird shit, got better at the flute, and started dressing well. My voice pitch went down about 3 octaves. Imagine my surprise when I was the one getting asked out, rather than it being me awkwardly stammering at some poor girl. Now I have a cute girlfriend and I don't want to nope the fuck out of existence anymore, so things are going pretty great. Sorry for the wall of text. It just all sorta came back to me, and I'm not sure whether to laugh or cringe really hard. TLDR, got a haircut and lost my virginity because of it. My friend, who we will call Mandy, was known as the weird kid at my old school. We had a friend who would also mentally and physically abuse Mandy, me and my other friends. We couldn't leave her group because her mom was a teacher at our school and would force us to be her friends again. Her twin sister was fine though. Mandy tried being talkative in hopes that people would wanna hang with me, but that made things worse. Her cousins who her and her brother went to their house daily even thought she was weird because she would make random songs about them because she loved to sing and would just ignore her, and she often felt left out. She tried her best to stop coming to their house after my uncle had sexually abused her 2 times, attempted several other times, and witnessed her cousin get sexually abused right before her eyes. Her parents never knew about this though, because she was scared her parents would believe her uncle over her. When she told me about this, she apparently had told her other friends in hopes they would help her get through this, but the first one she told thought she lying or joking, and the second one just didn't give a shit and just let it slip off her mind. I of course helped her through it, but whenever someone touches her, including myself, she flinches. She moved in the 7th grade, but we still hung out and talked a lot, but stopped when we got to high school. I ran into her recently at the mall and talked to her about what happened next. She started getting much better marks, going from B's and C's to A's and occasionally B's, and though she only has a few other people in her friends group, many people respect her and teachers love her way more than the teachers at our old school. She started to talk less or not talk at all and was soft spoken now, especially during class, and surprised a lot people including her cousins. She has been living a pretty happy life, and she is about to graduate and 3 of the universities she applied to all accepted her, though she is still traumatized by her past and her parents have stopped taking them to their uncle's home because they started having a weird vibes from that dude. Good ol' Maximum. I only graduated in 2017, but Maximum hasn't been around since 2015. I know this is about running into the weird kid, but I doubt anyone will ever see him again, so I just wanna tell you all about him. Maximum was the strangest boy. In middle school, I got my first taste of his quirkiness. We had math together in 6th grade, and halfway through the class the bell would ring, so that the 7th grade could go to lunch. We all knew this, even Maximum, but every day when that bell would ring, he'd pack his sheet up and pretend to get up and leave, going as far as about 2 steps from his desk on occasion. Then he'd sit back down, giggling to himself and looking around to see if anyone thought it was funny. It wasn't. Maximum had the weirdest way of writing. I wish I could paint a good picture of how he held his pencil, but I really don't think words can do it justice. When asked why he wrote that way, he would get very testy and huff that no one ever taught him how to hold his pencil properly. Maximum genuinely believed that every single airplane was releasing chemtrails that would poison us and ruin our brains, so he would always cover his face with a surgical mask when outside. He never missed an opportunity to freak out when he heard an airplane either. Maximum believed in something called a base 12 number system. I'm not at all sure what that is, but he was very passionate about it. Maximum was very interested in nuclear physics and such. Would always be drawing up diagrams for reactors, all sorts of stuff like that. Maximum was the biggest eye-roll white knight you can imagine. He was overly protective of every girl in school. If he came across a guy that playfully jabbed his girlfriend in the ribs, he would snap about how the guy was being violent and disrespecting a lady and would threaten to fight these guys, most of whom were football players. Maximum was tall, but he would likely get laid out in a heartbeat by anyone. Maximum liked to wear a trench coat every day. It was a running joke between my friends and I that he'd be our school shooter. He always looked over his shoulder and always rushed everywhere he went. He always freaked everyone out halfway through my junior year. Still 2015, Maximum up and vanished. It took us about a week to realize that we hadn't had an eerie vibe of school shooter in our midst. No one asked about Maximum or where he went. We all just accepted that he was gone. We suspect our school shooter theory was close to becoming more than a theory, and that's why he disappeared. But no one knows for sure. No one missed him, not even the teachers. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he turns up in the news for something horrible. I was the weird kid. This was mostly due to depression/anxiety/PTSD from an abusive and isolated childhood. Elementary school, my mother used to make me wear older style clothes, especially for picture day. I hated not being able to dress like a normal kid, and one boy commented that I looked like his sister's American Girl doll. I only had one close friend in 3rd grade, and if she was out of school I'd sit under a tree at recess and talk to myself/daydream. Needless to say, that concerned the teachers and they'd ask the other kids to invite me to play with them. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. I was honestly fine by myself. She moved after that, so I joined a group of friends, but I was never as close with anyone. Because my mother was a hoarder, we weren't allowed to have friends over, so that also affected my ability to have friends. We were pretty isolated. High school, I didn't shower as often as I should have, and my hair was one giant knot, so it was kept in a bun shape. This was my depression getting a good hold on me. I kept to myself, didn't try to make friends, and sat alone at lunch. I also was out of school a lot because of stomach issues I know now were stress related. By the end of 9th grade I refused to get out of bed for a week, and my psychologist and therapist recommended I get tutored at home. Luckily I had a great tutor, because she recommended for junior and senior year I attend the animal science course at Bose's. This helped me to socialize with students who all had a common interest, animals, and who had chosen to be there. Presently, I work 3 jobs to make ends meet, all animal related lol. I'm still weird, but I socialize more easily, and though I still struggle with my mental health, it's better than it has been. I'm also dealing with losing a younger brother to suicide. I didn't start dating until I was almost 22, and after a few mismatches I'm finally with the perfect person for me. Not only is he also weird in a complimentary way, he finds my quirks endearing and is my perfect support when having troubled times. So all in all things aren't great, but I cold ended up much worse off. I'm that weird guy from grade school. Why was I labeled like that? Because when I transferred from public school to a private school from 1st to 2nd grade, the 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Johnston, found a kid to abuse every year, and that year she picked me. I went from being a bright, happy little boy that loved school to a sullen, depressed, angry little boy that tried to find ways of getting out of having to go to school every single day. Ever since that first day of private school and all the days after, I was labeled the weird kid that needs to be picked on every single day because he has a funny last name and doesn't deserve to be treated with respect. It's funny how the opinions and actions of others can have a real visceral effect on the victims of bullying. We become cynical, sarcastic, and sometimes mean and violent because we feel like absolutely no one is on our side, that the whole world is against us, and only we the abused will stick up for ourselves. Other adults cannot be trusted to believe you. Other children will invariably follow the majority, so that they will not, in turn, become victims. I learned pretty quickly that the best 1980s way to shut a loudmouth bully down was to beat the shit out of them when no one was looking. Started getting in trouble for sticking up for myself, potty mouth and fighting. I could not, of course, harm an adult, as I was only a small skinny kid. Not that I didn't fantasize about it 10 years later, and I'd find out that teacher got fired after a long history of abuse against a targeted student every year was uncovered. She moved out of the state and became a public school teacher. A fake point. I took my scars with me to private high school and my reputation for being the weird kid. I transferred to public HS, where I dropped out and went to Job Corps to try and build a career for myself and get my JED. After learning that my perceived weirdness preceded me after that, I tried to go to college, but got scammed by BCTI. I was dumb, okay, and paid approximate $4,000 to use Mavis Beacon to learn how to type. Fast forward to age 25, I joined the army to pay for and support the newly pregnant girlfriend I had at the time. We got married and moved to on-post housing at my duty station. After I got back from basic point, divorced her after I got injured during an overseas deployment and came home to find our bank account with all of the combat pay I'd been saving up to buy a house with completely emptied and her and my son gone. She had been caught in a sting conducted by the FBI and a local county sheriff's office for stealing money from her mentally and developmentally delayed clients she was working with as a caretaker while I was away. She moved in with her parents and then abandoned my son to them rather than allow me to be my son's custodial parent. I became incredibly depressed, still dealing with the fallout from it, 14 years later, had to quit school to get a job because of the divorce and wound up being completely faked over by the court for child support payments. Fast forward another 10 years, I've gotten lots of counseling for all the stuff that had been building up by that point, and am now remarried to an amazing woman who I trust implicitly. We are getting ready to retire at 45 and live our lives for each other and our grown children from previous marriages. I have learned to embrace my weirdness and have found acceptance for it in my forever home point. I still deal with having PTSD and anger control problems. I still sing when I'm happy and talk to myself when I'm trying to work things through. I still love to draw and write sheety poems. I do, however, carry a large chip on my shoulder and will bristle at most perceived sights or immediately come to the defense of those being bullied at the expense of my own anonymity or my partner's. It can be difficult sometimes, especially given our current intolerant political climate. TLDR, I was the weird kid. Those labels and the bullying follow you into adulthood. It can affect not only your ability to trust another human being, but also insulate you from wanting to fully engage with and integrate into society more completely. Checking to see if I mentioned on here. Point was a non-Christian at a religious school. Point did not understand social awareness until I was in high school. I still have trouble understanding. Was diagnosed with high-functioning autism in college. Went to 5 doctors and was diagnosed with the same by all of them before believing it to be true. I also recently found out I was bipolar. Would throw myself at guys to force myself to stop liking girls. Christian school had me convinced that gay people were predatory. I would act as girly as possible to try and force the feelings of being in the wrong body out of myself. I did this to the point where it was very toxic and dangerous. I would lose my shit if someone said I did something even remotely masculine. Pretty much fake it until you make it. I was miserable, forcing myself to be something I wasn't. Therefore everyone around me also had to be miserable. Point now I'm a 21-year-old pagan man who likes both guys and girls. I'm better at understanding what is and is not socially acceptable. I have my mood spikes under control. I'm sorry to anyone who knew me from preschool until the end of sophomore year of high school. We had a whole class. I was in it. They said it was for gifted learners, but we were all the weird kids with our own trays. Every class has a top and a bottom. Point they've all gone off and made things of themselves. The little clown who weighed 100 soaking wet grew up and got cute. He was in defense contracting last I checked. One works for a local politician, another is at the university teaching. I don't talk to any of them anymore, and I'm sure they're just fine that way. The one who only drank tea for lunch, he seems to still live with his parents. He was so very wickedly smart, and I remember that he had that dry humor of an educated man 40 years his senior. Me, I don't even know what they thought was gifted about me. I dropped out of high school and finished in my 20s as a new parent. Have never gone to post-secondary and now have a formidable resume full of service industry jobs. I only surpassed minimum wage once. But I have a little place in town where I can see my kids jumping in my flower beds from the kitchen window while I wash dishes, and you know what? That's all I really need. Point for a while someone would see me in town and say they thought I'd run off to the big city. Nowadays my contemporaries are catching up and meeting me on the schoolyard to pick up our kids, and maybe that means it's time to find somewhere new. Point I still have a hard struggle making friends and holding conversations. Most of those contemporaries pretend they've never met me before. I think I was the weird kid, especially in middle school. I picked my nose and eaten it at the start of the first year only and made a classmate vomit when she saw me. I was really shy and had difficulty making friends. Talked a lot, read a lot, spoke with a weird accent nobody, me included, understands where it came from, was often absent-minded and creating imaginary worlds, didn't look at girls or women or find them attractive. Never watched Born, was quick to cry, and more thing beside those. I then managed to turn it around in high school and became much more sociable, started talking less, started crying less, became a lot more sarcastic, made a good amount of friends, most of which I lost contact with as they moved after high school to go to college. I still read a lot, but not as much. I blamed Demian for slowing down my reading speed, figured out creating worlds and stories was useless. If I wasn't going to share them, got a crush on a classmate, mostly for her personality. We were friends, and are still friends to this day. Confessed and was rejected, got kind of depressed for a while, because I felt alone, gave up with her, figured out I was pansexual, found a girlfriend, and ended up being that guy everybody who was in that class has some story to tell about, be it the times I got drunk, or me yelling a friend that I didn't want to know about his sex life. I'm currently fine. I'm in college, aerospace engineering, to be exact, still with my girlfriend. Haven't finished writing anything, because I didn't like the results, although this may be the time I managed to do it, and I'm in the process of coming out. The thing that is going worse is probably college, as I'm currently behind with the exams, but nothing too serious. There was this odd guy in high school who got teased a lot. One of the many things he did to enforce his reputation was announce his plans of being a pro basketball player during career class. He was white, 0.5 feet 6-ish, and I never saw him jump. I think he just wanted to be admired. He was extremely socially odd. I looked him up a number of years ago, and he is some sort of doctor, but everything he posts online is trying to make himself seem more impressive than he is. He lists all of his education. His undergrad is all mail order schools. He was on some basketball team sponsored by the major league team of my city, but he lists it as playing with the major league team, which clearly was never going to happen. He was in the Air Force, and lists all of these awards and merits he earned. They are things that everyone earns. He hypes and lists mundane credits and has built a persona around himself that he keeps trying to push. Someone commented in a Facebook group once asking if there were any famous people who went to our high school. He replied with, "What about me?" without irony. The piece de resistance was that we used to have these meetups every once in a while with people from high school. They would get posted to Facebook, and whoever showed up showed up. He would always show up, find one seemingly unattached female to corner then force conversation on them. One of them told me that at one point he asked her if she wanted to see the gun he kept in his car. At this point we were all well into our 30s. I feel sorry for the guy. I think I was kinda that kid. Probably not the weirdest, but I was just constantly from kindergarten to 8th grade, even bullied by my kindergarten and 5th grade teachers. Told my mom at age 7 that I didn't want to live anymore. I got into fights all the time, suspended multiple times. I was weird because I was a nice kid that was compassionate. I got my feelings hurt constantly because I didn't understand why kids wanted to be mean all the time. I was a big kid too. I was a little overweight, but always one of the taller kids in my classes. After middle school my parents moved us a couple hours away. I was excited to start fresh and create a new identity for myself, since I felt like I never got that where I lived before. At my old school I had eventually let the kids control who I was. Once you're told something about yourself so many times, you eventually believe it. I started at my new school and got to finally be the person I wanted to be. I got invited to join the football team. I made tons of friends and was given a legit nickname that still sticks with me to this day. It's not bad and was never used to hurt my feelings. I met my first real girlfriend between soph and junior year, who I married at 19. I did the military for 4 years, got out and got into a legitimate career, bought a house at 23, and have 2 beautiful children, and everything I could ask for. I used to hate those kids for making me feel the way I did. As I got older I felt bad for them, that there must have been a reason for what they did to me.